They have told you that success belongs to those who run on the hamster wheel along with the rest of society. They have sold you the lie that you must force your art, your aesthetics, and your strategy in the midst of daytime chaos, competing for oxygen in an atmosphere saturated with collective hysteria. But you know the physical truth of your own reality. When the sun rises and the day begins, the labyrinth demands its tribute. There are relentless logistical demands. There are small lives that depend absolutely on your energy, your constant care, and your presence. During the daylight hours, the day does not belong to you. It is the battlefield of survival and responsibility. You are consumed by the noise, the urgencies, and the inertia of a world designed to drain you. Therefore, the architect of reality does not compete in the noise of the day. The true empire is not planned under the scorching sun. It is sculpted in the sacred silence of the early morning. Welcome to the architecture of shadows. This is the definitive manual for the creator who has decided to stop being a spectator of the algorithm to become its source code. It is for the one who knows that their voice, their lens, and their message have the gravitational force to alter the market, but needs an absolutely friction-free territory to materialize it. The system wants to make you believe that you need to be in the center of a noisy metropolis, surrounded by empty contacts and superficial events to be able to monetize your existence and build a legacy. That is the illusion of the weak. The sovereign understands that true influence respects neither water nor land borders. From the trench of your own home, operating as an impregnable fortress, you have the power to project a frequency so high that the world will have no choice but to tune into it. Isolation and the scarcity of external distractions are not a disadvantage. They are your greatest military asset. In this journey, we will dismantle the tyranny of the linear clock. You will learn to execute the voluntary exile, that glorious instant where the world finally turns off, the lives you love and protect fall asleep, and you are left alone with the camera, the microphone, and relentless ambition. You will understand the urgency of the acoustic fast, hermetically sealing your mind to the panic of the masses, so that your only influence is pure strategy. Your daytime responsibilities are the anchor of your purpose. They are your why. But the deep and solitary night is your how. The revolution of your lineage will not be announced at noon. It is recorded, edited, and forged in the silence of 3 in the morning, when the sea breeze is your only witness. The labyrinth sleeps. Take a deep breath. The throne of the early morning belongs to you. Let creation begin. Chapter 1. The Fracture of the Clock, the Voluntary Exile. From the first day you stepped into a school, the system installed a parasite in your brain. It wasn't a political ideology or a religious dogma. It was something much more subtle, lethal, and omnipresent. They installed the dictatorship of Chronos. They taught you to worship the hands of the clock. They told you the day has 24 hours, that you must wake up at 7 because the sun rises, that you must be productive between 9 and 5 because industry demands it, and that you must sleep when the rest of the herd turns off the light. They programmed you to believe time is a straight line. Listen to me with the coldness of a strategist. Linear time is an artificial construction designed exclusively to synchronize slaves. The labyrinth needs 99% of humanity to operate on the same schedule so the global factory machinery works. They need you to wake up to consume their coffee. They need you to sit in traffic at the same time to consume their gasoline and return home exhausted to consume their empty entertainment. The traditional schedule is an invisible cage. As long as you measure your life by the hands of a wall clock, you will remain an employee of the system. The sovereign who dominates the metaphysics of reality does not operate under the tyranny of Chronos, chronological time, the time of mortals. The architect operates under the law of Kairos, opportune time, divine time. When you decide to build an empire, the first thing you must destroy is your relationship with the clock. A sovereign does not manage his time. The concept of time management is an invention for mid-level managers trying to fit more stress into an 8-hour day. The sovereign manages energy flows, and energy does not understand office hours. To execute voluntary exile, you must first understand the toxicity of daylight. During the day, the world is awake, and because it is awake, it is a hungry, noisy, and demanding organism. The sun acts like a bell that wakes up energy vampires. From 8 in the morning, your environment begins demanding tribute. The phone vibrates with irrelevant notifications. Emails demand answers. Domestic responsibilities, the demands of caring for others, the chaos of daily survival, and the noise of a society in constant panic compete for the most expensive currency in the universe, your attention. During the day, you do not belong to yourself. Your electromagnetic field is being bombarded by low frequencies. The day is reactive. You are constantly putting out fires, responding to other people's crises, and adjusting to the labyrinth's agenda. Trying to create a dynastic-level masterpiece in the midst of this chaos is like trying to solve a quantum physics equation in the middle of a nightclub. Your brain is in survival mode. The architect recognizes that the day is compromised territory. You can interact in it. You can make transactions, but you cannot use it to download the source code of your empire, to perform true alchemy, to structure your content, to visualize your expansion. You need to isolate yourself from the day's radiation. You need to fracture the clock and become an inhabitant of the shadows. Voluntary exile, the mentality of the geographic and spiritual island. 99% have a pathological fear of solitude and disconnection. They need the background noise of the crowd, so they don't have to hear the emptiness of their own souls. The architect, instead, uses isolation as his main tactical weapon. We call this voluntary exile. Operating in voluntary exile means assuming the mentality of an island. Geographically, an island is surrounded by the immense ocean. It is separated from the continental mass where the chaos of the metropolis gathers. The water acts as an unshakable defensive moat, filtering the weak and keeping invaders at bay. On a psychological and spiritual level, you must turn your mind into that island. You must raise an ocean of distance between your vision and the mediocrity of the world around you. Voluntary exile does not mean you stop loving your people or flee to the forest. It means you disconnect emotionally from the herd's trivial urgencies. When you voluntarily exile yourself from the normal schedule matrix, you stop being available. You stop answering messages in 3 seconds. You stop attending social commitments that drain your frequency. You become an unreachable entity. This isolation generates an atmospheric pressure chamber within you. By not dispersing your energy in 100 different directions, seeking to please the world, that energy condenses, becomes dense, heavy, and radioactive. It becomes the gravitational force that will allow you to alter reality at will. If the day is the property of the labyrinth, what is the creator's territory? The answer lies in the depth of the night. There comes a moment, usually after midnight, when a metaphysical miracle occurs. The world surrenders. The noise of engines dies down. The demands of parenting, the house, and survival yield to the weight of sleep. The mediocre fall unconscious in front of their screens. The entire labyrinth shuts down to reboot its servers. In that instant of absolute silence, when the house finally breathes calmly, a fissure in time opens. That is the vault of the early morning. The night is the only territory free of external demands. It is a black canvas where Kronos has died and Kairos reigns with absolute power. At 3 in the morning, no one expects you to answer an email. No one judges you, no one interrupts you. In the dark, the laws of mass society are suspended. It is in this containment vault where sovereigns build in secret. This is where the author writes the chapters that will change the industry. This is where the digital architect edits the audios and videos that millions will consume tomorrow. While the 99% sleeps, the 1% is hacking reality. Operating at night alters your neurochemistry. Without the distractions of sunlight and social noise, your brain enters an altered state of consciousness, flow state. The pineal gland activates, intuition sharpens. You are no longer thinking about your projects, you are channeling information directly from the ether. The connection to infinite intelligence is broadband, without the static of others' opinions. When you break the clock and take ownership of the night, you are committing maximum rebellion. You are telling the world, your schedules do not control me. I decide when my empire expands. The transmutation of energy, the abandonment of friction. Once inside the voluntary exile, you must learn to move not by hours, but by energy flows. The slave sits at a desk from 9 to 5, forcing himself to look at a screen even if his brain is dry, just because the clock says he must work. The result is mediocre work, full of friction, executed from resistance. The architect abandons friction. If it is 2 in the afternoon and the frequency of creation is not present, the architect does not force the machine. He retreats. He reads, rests, observes the ocean of his own mind. But if it is 2 in the morning, and suddenly he feels the electric pulse of an idea, he gets up without hesitation. He does not look at the clock to say, "I should be sleeping." He opens the microphone, turns on the camera, takes the keyboard, and executes with crushing creative violence until the last drop of that energy flow has been exhausted. This is the transmutation of energy, recognizing that you have windows of high cognitive density and windows of recovery. Forcing yourself to create when the channel is closed is an insult to your purpose. Refusing to create when the channel is open to obey a clock is a sin against your legacy. The new operative algorithm, the creator's singularity. To execute the fracture of the clock successfully, you must install this new algorithm in your nervous system, the sovereignty of the closed door. During your hours of asymmetric creation, especially in nocturnal exile, the door to the world is locked. You are inaccessible. Your attention is a laser beam cutting diamond. You cannot allow it to blur by trying to be a good guy available to everyone. Detachment from the masses chronotype. Stop feeling guilty if your hyperproductivity cycle does not fit the social standard. If you build your empire from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., that is your reigning schedule. The lion hunts when he is hungry, not when the zoo turns on the lights. Silence as fertilizer. Use the absolute stillness of the night as an amplifier. When you speak into a microphone in the silence of the early morning, your voice will carry an electromagnetic charge of peace and authority. People who record in the chaos of the day will never be able to replicate this. That silence will transfer to your work. You have fractured the clock. You have understood that linear time is the prison of conformists. You have entered voluntary exile, accepting that the solitude of the early morning is the price of the throne. You are no longer a time manager, you are an energy alchemist. While the whole world rests oblivious to the storm that is brewing, you sit in the darkness of your personal island, surrounded by silence, connect your tools, and begin to sculpt your dynasty. The clock is dead. The expansion begins. Chapter 2. The Acoustic Fast, Turning Off the Labyrinth Static. To build the architecture of an empire, you must first audit the building materials you are allowing into your system. 99% of humanity obsesses over their physical diet. They count calories, avoid sugar, and go to the gym. Yet they leave the doors of their brain wide open for the system to pour tons of radioactive garbage directly into their subconscious. You have fractured the clock. You have claimed the night and isolation. But physical isolation is useless if you carry the noise of the labyrinth with you into your sanctuary. The modern labyrinth does not control you with iron chains. It controls you through acoustic and informational saturation. The system, the news, social media, the outrage algorithm, the gossip of your environment, is designed by attention engineers with a single biological goal: to keep your amygdala fired up 24 hours a day. They want you to live in a perpetual state of fight or flight. They bombard you with collective hysteria, economic crises, market collapses, celebrity drama, and the panic of the day. Why? Because a terrified human being, distracted and overwhelmed by noise, is incapable of long-term thinking. Panic destroys the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain in charge of strategy, dynastic vision, and mathematical execution. While the masses fall asleep, endlessly scrolling on their phones, swallowing the fear and mediocrity of others, their vibratory frequency drops to the level of basic survival. The architect understands an unbreakable metaphysical law. You are the average of the bandwidth you consume. If your mind consumes hysteria, your mouth will speak hysteria, and your hands will build misery. You cannot tune into the Creator's frequency if your ears are full of slave static. To hear the instructions of the source, you must undergo the most brutal and necessary detoxification process of the modern era, the acoustic fast. The battlefield of the digital world and content creation. We must address here the battlefield, where the true war for your empire is fought. The digital world and content creation. When you make the decision to conquer the attention of the masses, to turn on the camera, and use the internet as your megaphone to monetize your lifestyle, ideas, or aesthetics, you face a dark seduction. The algorithm is an insatiable monster that rewards cheap noise. It whispers to you that, to grow fast, you must jump on empty trends, imitate the clowns dancing for likes, and participate in the controversy of the day. The mediocre creator falls into this trap. He begins to consume hours of his competition's content, looking for inspiration, and without realizing it, becomes infected. His original voice is diluted, his aesthetics are corrupted, his channel or account becomes a cheap copy of the general noise. He works tirelessly, but because he operates from a desperation to please the algorithm, the system punishes him, demonetizes him, or buries him in irrelevance. The sovereign creator imposes a wall of silence between his mind and his industry. You do not consume the competition's content. You do not dive into the sewer of comments looking for validation. The architect does not chase the algorithm's rhythm. The architect imposes his own rhythm on the market. For your voice in front of the microphone to have the weight of lead, the authority of a monarch, and the purity of a diamond, your mind must be empty of the noise of others. When the mass listens to your audio or watches your video, they should not hear someone trying to fit in. They should feel the gravitational pull of someone operating from a completely isolated dimension. Your content must be an oasis of crystal clear water in the middle of a desert of static, and you cannot offer crystal clear water if you yourself drink from the puddle of collective panic. The mental island, topography of the acoustic fast. Implementing the acoustic fast requires you to adopt a specific psychological topography. You must turn your mind into a fortified island. Think about it geographically. An island is a piece of sovereign land separated from the infected continent by an immense wall of salt water. The fads, plagues, and chaos of the great continental masses cannot cross the ocean unless the island's ruler allows it. Your mind must operate exactly like this, especially if you live in a physical environment where external chaos is the norm, an unstable economy, a country in crisis, a noisy environment. The outside world may be burning in collective panic, but your mental island remains in a perpetual spring of strategy and execution. This insularity is vital for those with dense lives. During the day, you are surrounded by the noise of survival. You have absolute responsibilities that depend on you. There are children demanding your energy, family demanding your attention, and the constant roar of domestic life. That noise is inevitable. It is the friction of material existence, and the sovereign fulfills his duty without complaints. But when the sun sets, when the biological obligations of your dependents have been met, when the house finally breathes in peace and the children sleep, the drawbridge of your mental island goes up. In that sacred moment, zero tolerance for static is declared. You turn off the news. If the world ends, you will find out tomorrow. Your worry will not change geopolitics, but it will destroy your empire. You silence consumption social media. If you use your phone, it is to emit code, create content, write, design, not to consume it. You block access to people who call to unload their emotional complaints. You are no one's psychological dumpster. The acoustic fast is the act of closing all intake valves of low-frequency information so the pressure of your internal wisdom can build. Voluntary brainwashing, hacking your subconscious. The word brainwashing has a negative connotation because we assume someone else is doing it against our will. But the architect of reality executes a voluntary brainwashing every day. If your brain has been accumulating the dust, doubts, and fear of the environment, it is your responsibility to grab a high-pressure hose and clean it. Absolute silence can be terrifying at first. When you cut off external noise, the first sound you will hear will be the scream of your own internal demons. You will hear your insecurities, the echo of past failures, and the fear of not being enough. That is why the masses flee silence. They do not want to be left alone with the monster of their own mediocrity. You will stay there. You will endure the noise withdrawal syndrome. And once you cross the threshold of discomfort, you will refill the void with pure frequency. During your acoustic fast, the only information allowed to cross your mental island borders is that which raises your spiritual thermostat and expands your operational capacity. Instead of commercial music that programs your mind for love drama and scarcity, you consume binaural frequencies that optimize your brainwaves. Instead of gossip, you consume the biography of great empire builders, ancient strategy treatises, and the laws of applied metaphysics. You study the mechanics of the universe. You understand that your mind is the projector of your holographic reality. You are replacing the defective software of fear with the military-grade software of absolute certainty. By detoxifying from noise, your intuition stops being an inaudible whisper and becomes a clear, resonant command, the tactical advantage of auditory invisibility. The secondary benefit of the acoustic fast is that it makes you indecipherable to your competition and the parasites in your environment. The individual who consumes noise exudes noise. He talks too much, has opinions on everything, and reacts to every stimulus. He is predictable. He is an open book anyone can read and manipulate. The sovereign who masters his auditory diet becomes a silent abyss. By not consuming collective hysteria, you stop reacting as they expect. When there is a crisis in your industry or platform, and all creators are making panicked videos complaining about the algorithm or lack of money, you appear impeccable. Your aesthetics are perfect, your message is elevated, your energy is serene. This discrepancy between the world's chaos and the icy peace of your execution generates an asymmetric magnetism. Brands, followers, investors, and high-level opportunities smell the desperation of the loud ones from miles away and flee. But when they detect the clean frequency of someone operating from the acoustic fast, they gravitate toward that person seeking refuge. Your strategic silence becomes the most powerful marketing tool on the planet. You are the beacon of cold light in the storm. The Purge Protocol execution instructions. Tonight, when the vault of the early morning opens, you will initiate the Purge Protocol. It is not a suggestion, it is the entry condition for sovereignty. The digital quarantine. From a specific hour, your phone ceases to be a two-way communication device. You cut the Wi-Fi for consumer apps. You enter airplane mode for the outside world. Only creation tools are allowed. The frequency filter. Relentlessly audit the 5 people you listen to most, physically or digitally. If their words are not about resource multiplication, consciousness expansion, or strategy, mute them. Your vital energy cannot subsidize the depression of small minds. The silence bath. Before beginning your night's execution, sit in absolute silence for 10 minutes. No music, no stimuli. Feel the day's static drain from your nervous system. Breathe the authority of isolation. Tune into the frequency of your purpose. The labyrinth wants you scared, hyper-connected and reacting to every shadow. The architect chooses to be deaf to mediocrity, to hear the symphony of his own destiny. You have built the walls of your island. You have turned off the noise. The vault is sealed. The mind is sharp as a scalpel. Now that you have absolute control of your acoustic environment, it is time to learn how to use that silence to manipulate matter. It is time to enter the level of metaphysical engineering. The static is dead. Let the pure transmission begin. Chapter 3. Early Morning Neuroplasticity, Hacking the Subconscious. The labyrinth has conditioned you to believe that the brain is a rigid structure, a block of cement that dries in your youth and with which you are condemned to live the rest of your existence. They have told you that your fears, your scarcity, and your insecurities are part of your personality. This is a biological lie designed to keep slaves docile. The sovereign who studies the architecture of reality understands the science of neuroplasticity, the physical and malleable capacity of the nervous system to destroy obsolete neural connections and build completely new electrical highways. But here lies the secret that traditional science rarely teaches with a tactical focus. Neuroplasticity does not operate with the same efficiency at any time of day. During daylight hours, your brain operates in beta wave frequencies. It is the state of alertness, survival, logical analysis, and stress. It is the necessary state to navigate the daytime chaos. In beta waves, your subconscious mind has armed sentinels at the door. These sentinels are the filters of doubt, slave logic, and skepticism. If in the middle of the day, surrounded by problems, you tell yourself, "I am the owner of a massive content empire and generational wealth," the beta sentinel will laugh in your face and reply, "Look at you, that's impossible, be realistic." The code bounces against the wall. But when you execute voluntary exile, when the clock strikes the depths of the early morning, your brain chemistry alters. While the dark sound of the Caribbean Sea hits the shores of the island in the dark, and the tropical heat settles in the silence of your fortress, metabolic magic occurs. The slow breathing of your 2 children resting in the next room sets the rhythm of an unshakable peace. The youngest, barely 2 years old, sleeps oblivious to the geomagnetic storm of ambition brewing a few meters from his crib. It is in this precise instant of perfect isolation that the sentinels fall. Your brain descends from beta waves to alpha and theta waves. Theta waves are the state of deep programming. It is the exact border between wakefulness and deep sleep. In this state, the vault door to your subconscious is wide open. There are no logical filters. There is no cynicism. It is in this acoustic sanctuary of the early morning where the architect inserts the new lines of code that the material body will execute the next morning. At 28, human biology reaches a spectacular vertex. It is the age of the crystallization of cognitive power, where the raw energy of youth merges with the density of adult experience. You have enough neuroplasticity to rewrite your destiny, and the tactical maturity not to waste time on cheap fantasies. Hacking the subconscious is not about repeating empty affirmations in front of the mirror like superficial self-help gurus. That is praying without ammunition. Hacking requires metaphysical code injection using high-voltage visual, auditory, and emotional anchors. In the silence of the early morning, you turn on your equipment. You adjust the ring light in the darkness of the room. You arrange the aesthetics, review the outfits, and check the lifestyle scripts you will project to the world. The ignorant look at this and see simple vanity for TikTok or YouTube. The architect knows that content creation is a cybernetic manifestation ritual. Every time you stand in front of that lens in the silence of the night, you are not simply recording a video. You are hacking your own neural network. You are forcing your brain to inhabit, breathe, and act the reality of abundance, beauty, and sovereignty before the bank account catches up to the numbers in the mind. The subconscious does not distinguish between a vividly imagined and acted experience and a real physical experience. When you record in an alpha-theta state, when you dress in the aesthetics of the empire and speak into the microphone with a firm and magnetic voice, your brain produces dopamine, serotonin, and testosterone. You are injecting the sequences of "I am authority," "I am magnetic," and "my aesthetics dominate the market" directly into the root of your nervous system. Tomorrow, when the sun rises, you will act automatically under this new operating system without having to force it. The labyrinth is designed to test if the lines of code you just injected are real or a deception, and the test is never gentle. Sometimes the digital system in which you operate deals you a blow. Platforms change their rules, reach drops, or you receive the dreaded demonetization on your transmission channels. The novice creator, who still operates with the nervous system of scarcity, stress beta waves, panics. He cries, complains in forums, curses the algorithm, abandons his projects, and convinces himself that the universe does not support him. The sovereign who has hacked his mind through early morning neuroplasticity does not react to the crisis. He audits it and capitalizes on it. He understands the science of synaptic pruning. In the brain, when a neural pathway is no longer useful, the body prunes it, destroys it, to save energy and build a more efficient pathway. When a platform demonetizes or slows down your content, it is not divine punishment. It is a synaptic pruning of the market. The universe is telling you that old route no longer supports the amount of voltage, wealth I am about to send you. I am going to cut it to force you to build a commercial infrastructure 10 times more lethal, intelligent, and diversified. You do not beg for the lost coins. You return to the drawing board in the dark of the night. You redesign the strategy of your food, lifestyle, and direct monetization videos. You understand that you are not an employee of YouTube or any other network. You are a sovereign nation. The networks are just merchant ports where you export your products and influence. If they close one dock, you open 3 more on other continents before dawn. That is the power of a subconscious hacked for absolute dominance. The nuclear reactor of the dynasty. There is a source of energy that 99% of the population misinterprets and uses as an excuse for stagnation, but which the transmuting architect uses as the aviation fuel of his empire. The labyrinth teaches you that having dependence is a break. They whisper that it is very difficult to build a massive internet business when you have 2 children to raise. They offer you the false empathy of the victim. It's normal you don't have time, poor thing. Your priority should be them. Forget your dreams. Reject that mental infection with violence. In the alchemy of success, children are not an anchor. They are the nuclear reactor of the dynasty. When you're exhausted at 3 in the morning, when the screen light burns your eyes while editing cuts of your next material, pain and physical tiredness threaten to shut down your engine. It is in that millisecond where the mediocre mind gives in and goes to sleep. But you get out of the chair. You walk silently barefoot down the hallway of your island home. You stop at the doorframe and watch the breathing of the 2-year-old and his older brother. At that moment, the brain, which is in deep theta waves, receives the greatest emotional impact a human being can process. The image of those children does not generate guilt or tiredness. It generates a wave of cold adrenaline and strategic survival. You look at your hands and understand the harsh mathematical reality. The financial, educational, and world-class shielding they need, so as not to be slaves of the system tomorrow, depends exclusively and solely on the speed at which your fingers type and your mind creates tonight. The love of the elite is not only shown with hugs during the day. The love of the elite is shown by decoding the global financial system in the early morning to build them a titanium vault that no national or global economic crisis can pierce. You return to the chair, adjust the camera lens, and execute the next hour of work not with cheap motivation, but with the relentless coldness of a predator securing food for its pack. Your subconscious associates extreme work with the survival of the lineage, making your discipline unshakable. The architecture of the loading ritual, tactical instructions. You cannot hack your subconscious simply by wishing it. The brain requires a physical anchoring system, a steel routine that conditions your neurology to enter dynastic execution mode, God mode, every night, regardless of your mood. Apply the following loading architecture during your voluntary exile. 1. The unanchoring of chaos, 23:00. The day is full of cortisol, stress hormone. Before injecting wealth code, you must empty the poison of daily survival. Turn off the main lights. Use low lighting or simply the reflection of your equipment. Absolutely silence all communication from the outside world. In this space, you are not the employee, nor the friend who listens to problems, nor the citizen of a broken economy. You are a digital ghost in the center of your island. Take a cold shower or wash your face with ice water to reset the vagus nerve and erase physical lethargy. 2. The visual code induction, 00000015. Your subconscious is a processing machine of images and emotions, not words. Do not repeat logical mantras. Close your eyes and enter the theater of your mind. Visualize the final architecture. Do not visualize a couple of likes or a few extra dollars. Visualize the consolidated empire. Feel the weight of influence. Visualize the perfect aesthetics of your platforms. Feel the sound of asymmetric payment notifications entering your accounts. Visualize your children growing up in ridiculous abundance, oblivious to the word scarcity. Generate the physical emotion, tachycardia, heat-contained euphoria in the present. This fuses the new neural connections. 3. Radioactive execution, 015, until flow extinction. With the brain submerged in alpha-theta waves and swimming in dopamine created by the visual induction, you open your work tools. You start recording, editing, writing strategies, or assembling your aesthetics. You will notice the friction disappears. What took you 3 hours of suffering during the day, you resolve in the early morning in 45 minutes of clinical clarity. Your words carry more weight. Your digital content gains a magnetic depth that will hypnotize the masses, because it was created from the source code and not from commercial anxiety. The identity feedback loop. Early morning neuroplasticity works by creating an infinite loop that feeds itself. At first, you will feel like a fraud. Your body will beg you to sleep. Your mind will tell you that setting up the ring light in the silence of your house while your children sleep is madness, and results take too long. That is the primitive brain resisting the pain of building new synaptic highways. But when you repeat this ritual every night, the brain surrenders. Neuroplasticity wins the battle. At 21 days, the effort disappears and becomes identity. You no longer try to be a content leader or a strategist. You are the sovereign creator. When you wake up in the morning, the woman who opens her eyes will not be the same one who went to bed. She will be a cybernetic vehicle recalibrated by silence, the sea, and subconscious technology. You will walk through the daylight hours with an icy tranquility that will terrify and fascinate those around you. They will know you possess a secret, an asymmetric advantage they cannot comprehend. And they will be right. While they spent the night sleeping to escape their debts, you spent the early morning hacking the central structure of your financial and spiritual DNA. You have installed the Empire Code. Now, physical reality has no choice but to reorganize itself to match the dictatorship of your new mind. Chapter 4. Shadow Engineering, Negotiating with Your Demons. The system that governs the masses is a master of anesthesia. To keep the population docile, the labyrinth has designed one of the most poisonous and destructive religions of the modern era, toxic positivity. They bombard you with plastic slogans dictating think positive, vibrate high, ignore the bad, and only good vibes. The mediocre individual embraces this philosophy because he is a coward. When he feels the terror of failure, anxiety about the future, or insecurity about his own value instead of facing that monster, he looks the other way. He pretends the monster does not exist. He puts on cheerful music, repeats an empty mantra, and closes the door to the basement of his mind, naively hoping that if he doesn't look at his demons, they will starve to death. The architect of purpose understands an unshakable law of spiritual thermodynamics. Everything you repress accumulates mass and density, and everything you ignore in the dark ends up governing your life from the shadows. Demons do not die when you ignore them. They entrench themselves. They become the invisible puppeteers of your existence. That fear of rejection you refuse to face is the exact reason you procrastinate when turning on the camera. That financial insecurity you try to cover up with positive thinking is what makes you tremble when you have to charge what your work is really worth. The elite do not ignore their fears. The sovereign does not flee from the darkness. The sovereign takes a torch, walks down the damp steps of his own psyche, and deliberately walks into the basement for a lethal confrontation with his own demons. At 28, you are at the geographic and chronological epicenter of your maximum biological power. You have the maturity to stop playing the victim and the lethal youth to build an empire. But you cannot build a skyscraper on land full of unexploded psychological landmines. Shadow engineering is the tactical process by which you sit at the table with your greatest terrors in the silence of the early morning. You don't go down to the basement to befriend your demons, nor do you go down to be devoured. You go down to audit them, dismantle them, and enslave them. The anatomy of the demon, demystifying terror. The first tactical step in shadow engineering is turning on the interrogation lights. Fear extracts its power almost exclusively from ambiguity. When fear is a black, fuzzy cloud in your head, it seems invincible. A demon in the shadow seems to be 10 meters tall. But when you force it to sit under the white, relentless light of extreme logic, you discover it is a scared dwarf operating a shadow projector. The architect dissects fear to destroy its mystique. You understand that terror is not a supernatural force. It is simply a neurochemical cocktail of cortisol and adrenaline fired by a primitive brain that still believes you are being hunted by a saber-toothed tiger when you are actually just about to publish a video online. Let's analyze the specific demons inhabiting your vault. As a woman, mother, and empire builder, you face heavy artillery the average man cannot even conceive. The demon of geographic scarcity. You live in an environment where the collective narrative is collapse. When you look out the window, the Caribbean offers you absolute beauty, but the human system around you screams crisis, devaluation, and stagnation. The demon whispers to you in the early morning, "You cannot build wealth from here, the environment is too hostile. You are trapped in a broken economy." The demon of digital exposure. You are building an ecosystem to monetize your aesthetics, lifestyle, outfits, and knowledge on short and long video platforms. The demon of exposure attacks your jugular. Who do you think you are? They will criticize you. The algorithm will crush or demonetize you. No one wants to see what you have to say. You will make a fool of yourself. The demon of lineage, maternal guilt. This is the greatest predator of the female psyche. You have 2 children. You have a 2-year-old boy who requires absolute biological, logistical, and emotional attention. The labyrinth has programmed you to believe in the myth of the martyr mother, the woman who must annihilate her dreams and identity to be a good mother. The demon of guilt suffocates you when you decide to isolate yourself to work at night. You are selfish. You are thinking about money and business when you should be thinking only of them. Your ambition will traumatize them. If you do not go down to the basement to look these 3 bastards in the eyes, they will destroy you. They will keep you playing small forever. It is time for the tactical interrogation. The Court of Darkness, the technique of consequential lethality. When you go down to the basement in the early morning, applying the voluntary exile and acoustic fast discussed in previous chapters, you execute the consequential lethality technique. The mediocre individual feels anxiety and tries to distract himself. You feel anxiety, close your eyes, invite it to sit in front of you, and ask the question that destroys all illusions. And then what? You take the fear to its last and most catastrophic mathematical consequence. You force it to show you the worst possible scenario, and then, with a strategist's coldness, you measure your survival capacity against that scenario. Interrogating the demon of exposure. Demon, if you upload that content, people from your past will mock you. Sovereign, and then what? Demon, they will make sarcastic comments behind your back. Sovereign, and then what? Will that mockery empty my bank account? Do those people pay for my 2 children's food? Will their opinion stop my breathing? Demon, no. Sovereign, then their mockery is asymmetrically irrelevant, just the noise of slaves scared to see a king claiming his crown. Next, interrogating the demon of scarcity. Demon, the country is broke, there are no physical opportunities here. Sovereign, and then what? Demon, no one on the island is going to buy from you or consume you at the scale you need. Sovereign, and then what? Does my Wi-Fi signal recognize borders? Does the TikTok or YouTube server know about local inflations? My market is not my zip code. My market is the global neural network of 5 billion mobile phones. My body is in the Caribbean. My empire pays taxes and invoices in the cloud. I am a citizen of the quantum economy. Your geopolitical argument is null. Next. When you force the demon to articulate its threats to the end, you discover that the death it promises you is purely psychological. There is no physical danger. No one is going to die because you publish a video. No one is going to execute you for starting a lifestyle business. The only one in danger of death is your old fragile ego, and the architect is more than willing to let that old ego bleed to death on the basement floor. The destruction of the martyr and the birth of the sovereign matriarch. We must make a tactical stop to annihilate the demon of lineage, because this is the one that paralyzes the most brilliant female minds of our generation. Society punishes the ambitious woman. It demands she immolate herself on the altar of motherhood. They tell you that the time you dedicate to structuring your content channels, monetizing your ideas, or polishing your aesthetics is time you are stealing from your children. Listen with the absolute frequency of truth. A broken, frustrated mother submissive to poverty is the worst operative model you can pass on to your children. When you go down to the basement and face this demon, you violently change its narrative. The sacrifice of the martyr mother creates guilty children full of emotional burdens. They see their mother suffer, abandon her dreams and wither, and the child internalizes that adult life is a prison. The architect executes the psychology of the sovereign matriarch. You are not abandoning that 2-year-old boy when you lock yourself away to create in the early morning. You are forging the titanium armor that will protect him when he has to go out into the real world. Your children do not need a mother who is physically present 100% of the time, but emotionally defeated and terrified of money. They need to see a beast. They need to grow up under the shadow of a queen who doesn't ask the system for permission to exist. When you take ownership of your aesthetics, when you monetize your lifestyle, when you break the barriers of the local economy through digital content, you are teaching your children the greatest metaphysical lesson they will ever learn in any school. Reality is malleable, authority is taken, and wealth is designed. That is your checkmate blow to the demon of guilt. You say to it, "My ambition is not my selfishness. My ambition is my highest expression of dynastic love. Every empire I build today is the ground where they will rule tomorrow." The demon dissolves into smoke, redefining relevance in a saturated market. By entering the arena of content creation, focused on lifestyle, fashion, outfits, personal care, hair, aesthetics, and food, you are entering one of the labyrinth's most saturated and brutal markets. The fear of irrelevance is deafening. The demon screams in the basement. There are millions of 28-year-old girls making videos of their outfits or what they eat. You are a drop in the ocean. You are invisible. And if you get noticed, the platform will demonetize you at the first mistake. The sovereign does not deny the statistics. She audits them. It is true there are millions making noise, but 99.9% of them operate from desperation. They make videos begging for validation. They dance because they are hungry for attention. They exhibit their lives because their self-esteem depends on red hearts on a glass screen. Shadow engineering allows you to separate your personal worth from an application's biometric data. You are not your likes. You are not your views. If the algorithm penalizes you or demonetizes a channel, as has happened to you in the past, you do not collapse. The slave creator cries when the algorithm changes. The sovereign creator mutates and hacks the new algorithm before breakfast. The fear of irrelevance dies when you change your transmission intention. You are no longer an influencer begging for attention. You are a frequency transmitter. When you show your lifestyle, you do not do it to be envied or validated. You do it to emit the code of sovereignty. You are demonstrating what discipline looks like, what good taste looks like, what extreme care of the physical avatar, body and hair, looks like as a temple of asymmetric execution. And the market, which is intoxicated by depressed and anxious creators, will irremediably gravitate toward your content because your aesthetics do not emit need. They emit icy certainty. And certainty is the 21st century's most scarce and addictive product. Thermodynamic transmutation, from terror to fuel, we reach the technological peak of shadow engineering. It is not enough to audit the demon or stop fearing it. The architect of purpose is a master of energy economics. He wastes nothing. Fear, stress, anger, and anxiety are not emotions. They are charges of kinetic energy. When you feel fear, your heart rate accelerates, your pupils dilate, blood flows to your extremities, and your body is flooded with glucose. Biologically, you are ready to fight to the death or run a marathon. What does the slave do with that massive energy? He freezes. He lies down to watch TV to calm down. He wastes a nuclear reactor of biological energy running from an illusion. The sovereign executes thermodynamic transmutation. You go down to the basement. You provoke the demon of scarcity. You look him in the eyes and let the reality of the system scare you. You think about the possibility of not being able to give your children the empire they deserve. You feel your stomach tighten. You feel adrenaline flood your bloodstream. The fire ignites, and in that exact millisecond of maximum biological tension, instead of freezing, you sit at the keyboard and open the camera shutter. You take the anger. You take the frustration about your geographic environment. You take the fear of failure, and you inject them directly into your work. You package that hot poison, filter it through the algorithm of vision, and turn it into a lethal script for your next video. You use the aggressiveness of adrenaline to edit transitions with sniper precision. You use anxiety to research audience retention strategies until your eyes burn. This is called burning your demons as coal for the train of your execution. Fear is no longer a wall that stops you. It is the hypercaloric fuel feeding the boiler of your dynasty. When you learn to do this, you become a terrifying and uncontrollable force for the market, because the system can no longer threaten you. If the system gives you peace of mind, you execute. And if the system gives you fear or crisis, you execute with triple the violence and speed. You have hacked the matrix. You are indestructible because you feed on the same monsters designed to devour you. 7th, the Pact of the Shadow, Integration and Mastery. Dawn is approaching. The vault of the early morning is about to close. You have gone down to the basement, interrogated the shadows, annihilated the martyr mother's guilt, and turned your digital anxiety into jet propulsion. The confrontation is over, and here you apply the final law. You do not kill your demons, you hire them. The architect does not seek a state of Zen enlightenment where he never feels fear. That is a biological lie. The architect signs the Pact of the Shadow. You line up your demons and give them work orders. You name financial anxiety Director of Audit and Revenue Optimization. Every time it tries to scare you with scarcity, its job will be to force you to review your monetization sources and open a new business line. You name the fear of irrelevance, or the algorithm Director of Aesthetic Quality Control. Its job will not be to depress you, but to be the relentless critic that does not allow you to upload mediocre content, ensuring every frame projects a queen's authority. You transmute maternal guilt and name it Guardian of the Legacy. Its task will be to remind you with fierce aggressiveness that failure is not an option because you have blood of your blood watching your steps. You have cleaned the basement of your mind. There are no more monsters hiding under the stairs. There is only a hyper-efficient engine room, fueled by the rawest and most powerful energy in the universe, operated by the cold, calculating mind of a 28-year-old sovereign who is about to export her vision from the Caribbean to the ends of the digital world. Fear tried to be your jailer. Today it has become your minimum wage employee. Close the basement door. The night was an absolute tactical success. Prepare yourself because the sun is about to rise and material execution demands your physical presence. The Empire awaits you. Chapter 5. The Monopoly of Isolation. The most expensive currency in the universe. To claim the throne of your industry and monetize your existence at the elite level, you must first cure yourself of the labyrinth's most common and pathetic disease, the terror of silence. 99% of humanity suffers from spiritual agoraphobia. They have a biological fear, encoded in their DNA since prehistory, of being separated from the tribe. 10,000 years ago, if you separated from the herd in the middle of the savannah, you were devoured by a predator. Human biology evolved to reward group belonging through oxytocin rushes and punish isolation with panic attacks and anxiety. The modern system, operated by the labyrinth's architects, has hijacked this biological flaw to keep you enslaved. They have convinced you that solitude is a punishment, a symptom of social failure, or a sign that something is wrong with you. They sell you apps, social networks, and noisy events as painkillers so you never have to face the abyss of your own company. The mediocre individual, when left alone in a room, enters a crisis. He immediately takes out his phone, turns on the TV in the background, or calls someone to talk about trivia. He needs external noise because, in the silence, the voice of his own mediocrity, of his aborted dreams and wasted potential, screams in his ear. The architect of purpose must apply violent genetic reprogramming. The sovereign understands that, in the hyper-connected era, where human attention has been cheapened and prostituted, isolation is no longer a death threat. It is the most expensive and exclusive currency in the universe. Solitude is not the prison of pariahs. It is the sanctuary of monarchs. If you cannot tolerate being alone with your own mind for hours, days, or weeks, you will never have the gravitational density necessary to bend the market. The man who needs the tribe's constant applause is a slave to the tribe. The woman who needs her friends' validation to feel valuable can never be the queen of her own empire. Let's talk about quantum economics and market tactics. Wealth has changed its form. In the industrial age, wealth was oil and steel. Today, wealth is uninterrupted attention. The labyrinth steals this currency from you every second of the day. When you answer an irrelevant message, you are paying a tax. When you consume pop culture drama, you are transferring your wealth to someone else's account. Nocturnal isolation is the strategy by which you establish a monopoly over your own attention. Imagine the geography of your fortress. At 28, while the salty Caribbean breeze hits Margarita's shores, The outside world, tourists, the masses, the system, sees the island as a place of escape, partying, and distraction. That is the consumer's lens. But you, as a sovereign creator, have inverted the lens. For you, the sea is not a vacation destination. It is a defensive moat. It is the physical barrier that isolates you from continental noise. When the sun sets over the tropics and the island plunges into darkness, you execute the monopoly. In that moment of tactical isolation, you recover every ounce of attention the world tried to steal from you during the day. And you direct all that concentrated kinetic energy toward a single focal point, the architecture of your content. This is where asymmetric magic occurs. The work you do alone in your studio, designing the narrative of your videos, planning the cinematography of your food recipes, structuring the aesthetic progression of your outfits, requires a level of neurological processing impossible to reach if someone else is in the room. Excellence demands absolute exclusivity. Aesthetics as armor, apparent frivolity versus the code of war. There is a deep-rooted prejudice in the slave mentality and the labyrinth's pseudo-intellectuality that lifestyle, aesthetics, fashion, and hair care are frivolous or superficial topics. They will tell you that building a YouTube channel or a TikTok brand based on how you dress, your hair color, or the food you prepare lacks philosophical weight. The sovereign in isolation laughs at this ignorance. The architect understands that the visual is the first line of code that enters the market's brain. Throughout the history of great empires, from Egypt's pharaohs to Rome's emperors, aesthetics were never an accident. They were a psychological weapon of war. Clothing, colors, body care, and food presentation were declarations of power, order, and sovereignty. When you isolate yourself in the early morning to research hair care formulations, study colorimetry, and assemble your digital avatar's wardrobe, you are not playing at being vain. You are forging your combat armor. You are designing the packaging of your authority. In a sea of careless, chaotic, and depressed content creators, a woman who presents herself before the lens with absolute control over her image, environment, and lifestyle projects, visual ataraxia. You are telling your audience's subconscious, I govern my matter, I order my physical reality, therefore I have the authority to order yours. This level of aesthetic perfection cannot be achieved surrounded by people. It calcifies in front of the mirror in the strictest solitude. It requires the same analytical rigor as a scientist in a lab. Isolation allows you to refine your visual identity until it becomes an unmistakable signature. It becomes a registered trademark that the algorithm and later the whole world will be forced to respect. Immunity to approval, emptying the ego. The ultimate goal of isolation is not just productivity. It is the calcification of identity. When you are constantly surrounded by people, your identity is like wet clay. Unconsciously, you alter your speech, opinions, and plans to fit the group's mold. You seek instant approval. If you wear an outfit or pitch an idea and the group frowns, you change course for fear of rejection. The socialized individual is a pathetic chameleon who does not know who he is when left alone. The monopoly of isolation subjects you to a high-temperature furnace. Being alone night after night, with no one to applaud when you edit a perfect transition in your video, with no one to say how smart you are when you design your monetization strategy, you are forced to find validation solely in the act of execution itself. That is the moment the wet clay calcifies and becomes a diamond. You develop immunity to approval. When your identity hardens in silence, the world loses the power to destroy you with its words. What do you care if an anonymous internet comment criticizes your lifestyle or content? That critic is a slave operating from noise. You forge that piece of content in sacred silence, connected to the source code. The judgment of mortals bounces off the armor you built in the void. The novice creator uploads a video to TikTok and stares at the screen, refreshing the page every 5 seconds, desperate for a like, sweating cold if the metric doesn't rise. That is the biological response of one who fears being alone. The sovereign matriarch, the leader of her own lineage, uploads the video, closes the app and goes to sleep, or attends to her children. She is not interested in applause, she is interested in data. She does not post to ask permission to exist. She posts to issue an imperial edict. If the market responds today, excellent. If it does not respond today, she will adjust the strategy in her next nocturnal exile and attack again tomorrow. The absence of validation does not break her, because she no longer feeds on public opinion. She feeds on her own certainty. The matriarch's priesthood and the dynastic shield. The true test of tactical isolation manifests in the structure of your blood. You have 2 children. One of them, a boy barely 2 years old, represents the most absorbing, chaotic, and biologically demanding stage of human existence. The labyrinth will tell you that motherhood at this stage is incompatible with building a media and financial empire. They will suggest you choose. Either you are a sacrificed and exhausted mother, or you are a successful and absent businesswoman. The system enjoys creating these false dilemmas to castrate female potential. The Dreamer's Code pulverizes this paradigm. The isolation you impose on yourself is not a flight from your children, it is the war room where you secure their freedom. Understand the asymmetric sacrifice you are making. While the average labyrinth mother uses her children's sleep hours to escape, watch TV series, or complain about her tiredness in WhatsApp groups, perpetuating her own economic slavery. You start your second shift. You enter your monopoly of isolation. The contrast is brutal and beautiful. A few meters from you, in the silence of the Margarita house, 2 future generations sleep under your roof. And in the studio or living room, illuminated only by the monitor and the ring light, you are structuring the foundations of a digital corporation. That isolation does not make you a bad mother. It elevates you to the rank of dynastic architect. You are paying the price in solitude, dark circles, and physical fatigue to guarantee that those 2 children never have to beg for a salary from a mediocre boss. You are recording, editing, and decoding the lifestyle and aesthetics market so that they are born and grow up, knowing that wealth is not a geographic accident. They will know it is the mathematical result of extreme discipline and technical knowledge. When tiredness tries to break you at 3 in the morning, when you feel the unbearable weight of solitude and the temptation to surrender to sleep, do not seek motivation in empty phrases. Look toward your children's room. Turn your isolation into a priesthood. That silence in which you operate is the invisible shield that will repel poverty and mediocrity from their future. Compiling the source code. If you analyze all the great empire founders, innovators, and leaders who have altered the course of the world, you will notice an undeniable pattern. None of them discovered their code in the middle of a party, a cocktail, or a crowded convention. They all had to descend into the cave. Tesla revolutionized electricity in the total isolation of his mind. Desert prophets forged their authority in caves far from cities. Roman emperors retreated to their tents before dictating conquest tactics. Your cave is your early morning studio. Your desert is the screen light as you compile your next launch. Isolation is not a permanent state. The sovereign must eventually go out to conquer the market, but it is the mandatory forge state. Do not fear the social void. If your past friends start disappearing because you no longer go to their noisy events, celebrate. It is the universe executing a free audit of your environment. They are doing you a favor. People who walk away because they see you focused, isolated, and building are people who wanted you to stay in the mud with them so they wouldn't feel so bad about their own inactivity. Their absence is not a loss. It is the elimination of dead weight. The most expensive currency in the universe is already in your hands. You own your attention. You have turned off the continent's noise and established martial law on your island. You have understood that your aesthetics, recipes, lifestyle, and digital channels are not hobbies. They are the infantry you are training in the dark to conquer the digital terrain tomorrow. Keep the doors closed. Let the outside world believe you are inactive. Let them underestimate the young mother on the Caribbean island. In the deafening silence of your isolation, the source code is compiling. The steel is tempering. And when you finally decide to open the doors and release the massive volume of your work upon the market, the shockwave will leave no one standing. Isolation was your voluntary prison. Now, it will be the throne from which you dictate the rules. Chapter 6. The Frequency of the Singularity, Quantum Alignment of Capital. The system has lied to you about the nature of money since the day you were born. They programmed you to believe capital is a pile of dirty paper bills, digits on a screen, or metal coins earned by exchanging sweat and physical suffering. The labyrinth designed a whole religion of scarcity around hard work. They tell you that to be rich, you must be a slave to the clock, destroy your body, abandon your peace, and chase the penny until your hands bleed. Wake up and observe reality through the lens of applied metaphysics. The architect of purpose does not see paper or coins. The architect sees electromagnetic current. The English word for currency comes from the Latin currere, to run, to flow. Money is, in its purest and most quantum state, a current of energy. It is a thermodynamic conductor of value. And like all energy in the physical universe, capital obeys immutable laws. It does not flow where there is need, it does not flow where there is desperation, and it definitely does not flow where there is emotional static. Money flows, by pure mathematical gravity, toward the point of greatest certainty and least resistance. At 28, you're at the exact moment to transition from bill chaser to capital magnet. The masses chase money with their tongues hanging out, exhausted, scared, begging the market, their employer, or a digital platform to throw them some crumbs. That pursuit emits a frequency of radioactive anxiety that repels abundance. The sovereign understands that wealth is not chased, wealth is aligned. The singularity of capital occurs when your internal thermostat, your certainty, your aesthetics, your technical mastery, and your icy peace reaches a temperature so high and constant that external market money has no biological or inertial choice but to gravitate toward your accounts. Money never sleeps, it's true, but neither does your magnetic frequency. The question is, while the world sleeps, is your frequency emitting panic, or is it emitting a gravitational field of absolute sovereignty? The eradication of financial anxiety, the creator's cancer. To align your frequency with capital, you must first remove the most lethal tumor infecting content creators and entrepreneurs: financial anxiety. In the digital market, where you export your lifestyle, your outfits, your metaphysics knowledge, and your beauty routines, energy cannot be faked. The camera lens is the world's most powerful X-ray scanner. If you sit down to record a recipe, personal care, or spiritual development video, but in the back of your mind you are terrified thinking, I need this video to go viral to pay next month's bills. I need the algorithm to approve me to monetize. That desperation is encoded in the pixels of your content. The audience, even if they cannot logically articulate it, smells the blood and fear in your frequency. They feel the need, and the human being is programmed to instinctively reject anyone who approaches from emotional or financial beggary. We must dissect a critical event in your timeline: demonetization. In the past, the transmission system, like YouTube, dealt you a blow, cutting off your channel's income flow. The novice creator and slave to the matrix sees demonetization as a tragedy, an unjust punishment that plunges him into depression and anxiety. He cries in front of the monitor and begs the corporate platform to return his coins. The architect of reality processes that same event as a quantum audit of dependence. The universe cut off that tap because your financial thermostat was too attached to the validation of a single corporate algorithm. It was telling you, you are a queen. You cannot depend on the charity of a single robot in Silicon Valley. I am going to temporarily cut this supply to force you to diversify your empire, to thicken your skin, and to understand that you are the source of wealth, not the platform. Eradicating financial anxiety means accepting, with mathematical coldness, that platforms, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, are simply distribution avenues, not your bosses. If one avenue is blocked, you don't panic. You simply pave 3 new avenues that same night. You stop recording content to survive and start recording content to rule. When you turn off the anxiety in your mind in the early morning and stand in front of the camera, not as someone who needs money, but as someone who already possesses the universe's source code and is doing the masses a favor by sharing it, your frequency changes. You go from beggary to asymmetric authority, and capital kneels before authority. The thermostat on the island, immunity to the local economy. This is where metaphysics collides head-on with geopolitics, and where your physical environment becomes the greatest training ground for your mind. You are operating from the Caribbean, on an island surrounded by salt water, within a nation whose physical economy has been labeled by the world as fractured, in crisis and suffocating. 99% of the people in your zip code breathe the oxygen of collapse. They talk about scarcity at breakfast, consume complaints at lunch, and go to sleep terrified by hyperinflation. The country's collective thermostat is set at absolute zero. If you allow the temperature of your environment to dictate the temperature of your mind, you are dead. Your creativity will dry up, and your digital empire will collapse before it is born. The frequency of the singularity demands that you establish an impregnable financial thermostat. You have to understand a fundamental truth of the quantum era. Your biological body may be stepping on Margarita's sand, but your financial passport is digital, global, and borderless. You do not participate in the local scarcity economy. You are an ambassador of the trillion-dollar cloud economy. The architect makes a relentless separation between his physical geography and his economic geography. While the neighbor complains there is no money on the street, you close your studio door in the early morning, connect your network, and turn on a camera that transmits your aesthetics, lifestyle, and knowledge to markets in North America, Europe, and the rest of Latin America, where capital flows in abundance. To align your capital, you must become deaf to local panic. Your mind must be a hermetic vault. When you go outside and see the crisis, your subconscious order must be, that is the three-dimensional reality of those operating in beta waves. I operate in the singularity. My bank account is not indexed to this country's problems. It is indexed to my ability to provide visual, aesthetic, and spiritual value to the global market. By keeping your internal thermostat at asymmetric abundance while your physical environment burns in scarcity, you generate massive electromagnetic friction. That friction is the fire of the forge. It makes you 10 times more resilient, creative, and unstoppable than the average first-world content creator, who is soft and lazy because he has never had to build an empire in the middle of the trenches. Your geographic context is not your prison. It is your 500-kilo training weight. The pseudo-spiritual labyrinth has created a false dichotomy. They tell you that if you are focused on metaphysics, personal growth, and spiritual development, you shouldn't care about material things, fashion, or your physical appearance. They label an interest in cosmetics, hair care, and lifestyle aesthetics as empty. This is the trap of the falsely enlightened who live in poverty and bitterness. The dreamer's code dictates that the physical is the direct extension of the metaphysical. In nature, health, symmetry, and shine are the biological indicators of divine order and high frequency. A lion's shiny coat or an eagle's plumage are not vanity. They are the physical manifestation of their internal lethality and sovereignty. When you dedicate time to structuring videos on how to restore hair, when you analyze colorimetry, when you assemble an outfit with architectural precision, or when you present a plate of food on your social networks with perfect lighting and composition, you are not being superficial. You are applying the geometry of order over chaos. You understand that the outside world is desperate for order. The care you put into a strand of hair, the exact shine of a hairstyle, the color palette of the clothes you wear, all of that communicates a subconscious message to the audience. I govern matter. I do not let myself be dragged by entropy. My body and my environment are a temple of absolute control. The quantum alignment of capital occurs when the market recognizes that order. Brands, sponsors, viewers, and platforms pay millions for the privilege of associating with the aesthetics of control. The architect does not record beauty or lifestyle videos out of frivolity. She does it from perception engineering. You know that your body is the avatar through which the creator's frequency experiences this three-dimensional plane. Maintaining that avatar in its state of maximum beauty, health, and symmetry is an act of metaphysical reverence. By raising your aesthetic standard to the 1% level, your financial frequency automatically rises. Capital respects beauty because beauty is the visible proof that someone has invested time, discipline, and focused energy in rejecting the world's decay. You monetize your aesthetics because your aesthetics are your military resume. The hunter versus massive gravity bait. We reach the operational center of the financial singularity. the mathematical difference between the subject and the king. The hunter gets up in the morning, grabs his spear, and runs after the prey. He spends enormous amounts of energy, sweats, despairs, and often returns home empty-handed because the prey heard him coming and fled. That is the average entrepreneur and creator chasing money. They look for trends, copy others, and throw out content desperately. The sovereign is not a hunter. The sovereign is massive gravity bait. The sun does not chase the planets to make them revolve around it. The sun simply sits in the center of the solar system, accumulates mass, becomes immensely dense, burns with radioactive temperature, and lets the law of gravity do the rest. The planets have no choice but to orbit around it. In the deep night, under the strict silence of your voluntary exile, you are not devising how to chase money tomorrow. You are accumulating gravitational mass. How do you accumulate that mass? Mastery of knowledge, devouring books on metaphysics, strategy, marketing, and finance when others sleep. Perfection of delivery, rehearsing your diction, your camera presence, and your angles until every frame of your content breathes authority. Unshakable peace, ataraxia, eliminating the need for your content to work today, trusting blindly in the long-term law of sowing and reaping. When you publish a lifestyle video, a cooking recipe, or a personal development message on TikTok or YouTube, you don't throw it like a hunter throwing a spear. You deposit it on the net, like a nuclear reactor deposited in the center of a city. You stop chasing capital when you understand that your job is not to make money. Your job is to increase the value of the person you are until money seeks you out for refuge. Money is desperately seeking stable leaders, brilliant minds, and aesthetically perfect channels in which to multiply. If you build that channel, capital will come to you with the force of a tsunami, not because you begged for it, but by pure geometric alignment. The metaphysics of money would not be complete without connecting it to the absolute why that anchors your existence to this planet. The labyrinth has tried to fill you with guilt by telling you that money is the root of all evil, that desiring wealth makes you materialistic, and that, as a mother, you should settle for love and set aside aggressive financial ambition. It is the philosophy of losers designed to keep your lineage chained. The Dreamer's Code dictates that capital is the dynastic armor of motherhood. You have a 2-year-old boy and an older son, 2 heirs who did not ask to come into a chaotic world, but who are now under your jurisdictional and spiritual protection. If you reject the frequency of the singularity and decide to live in financial mediocrity to seem humble, you are condemning them to be victims of the system. You are condemning them to study what they can and not what they want, to work for bosses they will hate, and to suffer the panic of survival. The architect loves her children with tactical ferocity. When you align your frequency with capital, when you decide to invoice in dollars globally from your island, when you build monetized channels and multiple income streams on the internet, you don't do it to buy designer bags, although you can if you wish, as a symbol of aesthetic sovereignty. You do it to raise a 30-meter-high titanium wall around your blood. Money in the hands of a stupid mind is poison, but money in the hands of a matriarch connected to the creative source is an impenetrable shield. With asymmetric capital, you buy the most valuable currency you can inherit to your children: freedom of choice. Money allows you to decide what environment they grow up in, what mentors they have, what kind of high-frequency organic food they consume, and teaches them, through their mother's unstoppable example, that the human being was not born to ask permission. When physical exhaustion threatens your neuroplasticity in the early morning, do not think of money as paper. Think of capital as the wall of fire you are building in front of the door to your children's room. Every edited video, every curated outfit, every personal growth script written in solitude is another brick in that fortress. You have calibrated your thermostat. You have understood that aesthetics is not frivolity. It is the geometry of power. You have abandoned the anxious pursuit and become a center of massive gravity. Money is no longer your master. It is your loyal employee. You have reached the quantum alignment of capital. Now, with resources flowing into your vault, it is time to learn how to use that power to dominate market cycles and shield your work against the entropy of time. Winter is coming, and the architect must be ready to buy the world. Chapter 7. Tactical Rest, Repose vs. Existential Coma. The labyrinth has designed and perfected one of the most subtle, destructive and efficient secular religions of the modern era, the culture of absolute burnout. From industrial-age factories to modern corporate cubicles and the false philosophy of the modern entrepreneur, the system has programmed the masses to glorify exhaustion. They have convinced humanity that productivity is a linear function of physical sacrifice and sleep deprivation. Observe the herd's behavior. The average individual measures their success level or personal worth by how tired they end the day. They boast about their dark circles, their caffeine dependence, their chronic stress levels, and their lack of sleep as if they were military decorations obtained in a heroic war. They firmly believe that whoever suffers the most deserves to win the most. This is the mentality of slaves operating in the Matrix's coal mines. The system applauds the one who exhausts himself because a chronically tired individual does not have the thermodynamic energy necessary to question the system, rebel, or build his own empire. Chronic tiredness destroys the brain's prefrontal cortex, the center of long-term strategy, and leaves the individual operating purely from the amygdala, reactive, scared, and focused solely on day-to-day survival. Under this slavery paradigm, the common man does not rest. He simply passes out. He works, consumes stress, browses bright screens until midnight, injecting cheap dopamine into his nervous system, and eventually, when biology can no longer sustain the overload, the system collapses. We call this involuntary biological collapse the existential coma. The existential coma is not a state of rest. It is an emergency disconnection executed by the body because the mental engine has melted down. During this state of heavy lethargy, the brain does not process strategic information, does not repair tissues optimally, and does not align the source code. The individual wakes up the next day feeling physically beaten, enveloped in a cognitive fog, and returns to the hamster wheel, dragging his body with barely 20% of his real capacity. The architect of purpose repudiates and rejects this biological barbarism. The sovereign understands that his body and mind make up the most lethal hardware and software in the known universe. And just like a high-precision nuclear reactor or a quantum supercomputer, the machinery requires cooling cycles and scheduled maintenance so as not to self-destruct. The architect does not wait for the body to surrender in an act of weakness. The architect imposes by his own will tactical rest. To master the technology of tactical rest, you must understand the true architecture of your nervous system. You possess two operational engines, a conscious mind, the user interface that makes immediate decisions, speaks, executes physical tasks, and deals with the three-dimensional environment, and a subconscious mind, the background quantum processor. The subconscious manages trillions of synaptic connections, stores historical data, recognizes imperceptible patterns, and connects with infinite intelligence. The fatal mistake of the novice and the false leader is believing that productive work only occurs when the eyes are open and the hands are moving. The architect knows that the most superficial and trivial part of the work is done during wakefulness. True heavy engineering, the resolution of massive logistical bottlenecks, the creation of disruptive aesthetic and strategic concepts, and the alignment of financial frequency occurs solely and exclusively at subconscious levels, while the conscious mind has been turned off. When you execute tactical rest, you're not wasting time or showing weakness. You're not turning off your empire. You're simply closing the user interface that consumes too much energy to redirect 100% of the voltage toward the internal processing core. The sovereign sleep is not a pause in creation. It is the moment of greatest mathematical and structural activity. It is the process of defragmentation of reality. The individual in existential coma takes his problems to bed. He tosses between the sheets, sweating cold, trying to solve a billing problem, a conflict with a partner, or a market crisis using his conscious and exhausted mind, beta waves. This is like trying to render an 8K video using a mobile phone battery at 1%. The result is friction, overheating, and system failure. The sovereign operates in a diametrically opposed manner. He knows his conscious limits and delegates problem-solving to his superior machinery. The core of tactical rest technology lies in a strict command protocol executed minutes before the brain descends into delta waves, deep sleep. This protocol is called the processing order. Imagine that your subconscious mind is the chief operating officer of the largest corporation on the planet. It is brilliant, infallible, and has access to an infinite database, but it lacks its own initiative. It needs direct and precise instructions from the chief executive officer, your conscious mind, before starting its night shift. In the darkness of your resting chamber, after having cleared the day's static through the acoustic fast and neutralized your demons with shadow engineering, the moment for tactical delegation arrives. If you face a seemingly unsolvable logistical problem in your business, if you can't find the exact angle for your next marketing campaign, or if there is a structural obstacle in your empire's architecture, you do not force the answer. You lie back, relax your physical avatar's muscle tension, assume a posture of absolute dominance even in rest, and dictate a verbal or mental order with military coldness. Subconscious. The physical avatar will enter the cellular regeneration phase during the next few hours. The conscious interface shuts down now. Your priority task for this cycle is to take all the variables of the problem, insert specific problem, audit the probability roots, dismantle the logical barriers, and deliver the exact mathematical solution to me, packaged and ready for execution the instant I open my eyes at dawn. Execute. This is not cheap mysticism. It is applied neuroscience. By formulating the question and letting go of the problem, you remove the anxiety load from the amygdala. The conscious brain relaxes knowing the problem has been handed over to a competent higher authority. During the next few hours, while you float in the restorative void, your neural networks will comb through millions of data combinations without the interference of conscious doubt or fear, until assembling the perfect answer. The military-grade sensory isolation chamber, the quality of subconscious processing, is directly proportional to the purity of the physical environment in which the body rests. The architect does not sleep anywhere or under any conditions. The slave collapses on a couch in front of a glowing screen or in a room full of blinking lights and street noise. The sovereign designs his resting space as a military-grade sensory isolation chamber. Your bedroom must be a temple dedicated to recharging your weaponry. The outside environment is chaotic, but the inner perimeter of your resting sanctuary must be under strict martial law. Absolute darkness. The slightest blue or artificial light penetrating your eyelids interferes with the pineal gland and melatonin production, sabotaging sleep depth. The sovereign imposes a spatial void blackness in his chamber. Controlled thermodynamics. The human body requires a drop in its core temperature to execute tissue repair. A hot room generates biological friction and activates mild stress responses. The temperature must be cold, preserving the body's energy. Clinical silence. The acoustic fast extends to sleep. The auditory brain never completely shuts down. It keeps scanning the environment for threats. If there is background noise, the brain spends energy processing it. The silence must be so dense you can hear your own breathing. In this sterilized chamber of external stimuli, true synthesis occurs. The aesthetics of vitality are forged here. If your empire depends on your visual acuity, your stage presence, or your relentless authority, you cannot afford to present a worn-out physical avatar. Collagen repairs, testosterone and growth hormone levels calibrate, and the central nervous system rebuilds. A rested face and an unshakable posture are the greatest demonstration of power, dominance, and visual ataraxia in a world where everyone else walks dragging their feet. The astral design table, training while you sleep. During tactical rest, the nature of dream activity mutates radically. The common man, tormented by his debts, lack of purpose, and repressed anxiety, experiences chaotic dreams. His nights are full of chases, falls into the void, and social humiliation scenarios. His dreams are simply the escape valve of a terrified subconscious trying to process the panic the individual refused to face during the day. For the architect who has already consciously processed his fears through shadow engineering, the dream landscape is cleared. There are no more survival nightmares because the primitive brain has been tamed. In the absence of fear, the dream space becomes the astral design table. Your mind uses the REM phase not to scare you, but as a quantum virtual reality simulator. Having given the processing order, the subconscious renders complex strategic scenarios without any risk in the material world. In this phase, your mind can test 1,000 iterations of a business model, experiment with radical aesthetic designs, or rehearse the exact tone of a critical high-stakes negotiation. You are training while you sleep. You are operating in dimensions where physical laws and time limitations do not exist, allowing you to compress years of analytical experience into a few clock hours. That is why the sovereign wakes up with a sense of déjà vu when executing a brilliant maneuver in real life. It is not luck, it is simply the material execution of a strategy already perfected in his regeneration chamber simulations. High-density micro-rest, the tactical reboot. Executing the empire in the real world is violent, unpredictable, and consumes massive amounts of cognitive bandwidth. There will be days when the tactical load is so crushing that the conscious processor begins showing signs of fatigue well before nightfall. Vision blurs, irritability increases, and decision-making speed drops. The slave, feeling this mid-afternoon decline, resorts to artificial stimulants. He drinks liters of coffee or energy drinks, forcing his adrenal glands to squeeze out the last drops of cortisol to stay awake. He keeps working, but his work becomes clumsy, reactive, and plagued with errors that will cost him triple the time to fix later. The architect detests inefficiency. When the system alerts to a critical drop in performance, the sovereign does not drug himself with stimulants to keep producing garbage. The sovereign stops the war and executes the high-density micro-rest. This is the biological equivalent of rebooting a server. You retreat from the battlefield for a strictly timed period of 20 to 30 minutes. You turn off all sensory inputs. You do not look at your phone to relax. Data consumption is not rest. You isolate yourself, close your eyes, and force a rapid descent into alpha brainwaves. In this brief period, you do not reach deep sleep, but you manage to empty your brain's RAM. You clear the saturation of morning stimuli and allow the nervous system to recalibrate. When the timer goes off, you do not get up lazily. You get up like a sniper who just cleaned his rifle scope. This micro-rest is not an act of laziness, it is a maneuver of relentless efficiency. It allows you to divide a 24-hour day into two completely distinct operational shifts, giving you a crushing mathematical and logistical advantage over your competition, who spend the second half of the day operating like cognitive zombies. The morning extraction protocol, the assumption of the throne. Tactical rest is a closed cycle, and the final phase is the most critical of all. The way you transition from the regeneration void to the material world defines your empire's tone for the next 18 hours. The slave hates the morning. The sound of his alarm is a reminder of his prison. He fights the sheets, delays the clock 5 times, complains about the sunlight, and prolongs his existential coma as much as he can because he hates the reality he has built. And when he finally gets up, the first thing he does is grab his phone to anesthetize himself with others' lives before facing his own. The architect's awakening is a calculated explosion of intention. The sovereign opens his eyes, and the reality of his sovereignty welcomes him. There is no friction, there are no complaints. You have finished loading your weaponry, and it is time to unload the ammunition on the market. To execute this transition masterfully, you apply the morning extraction protocol. Phase 1. Capturing the download, minute 0 to 5. Under no circumstances do you touch your mobile device or allow information from the outside world to penetrate your newly rebooted brain. In the first seconds of wakefulness, the border between the subconscious and conscious is paper thin. Your mind has just spent hours processing the processing order you gave it the night before. Stay perfectly still. Listen to the first thought that floats to the surface of your mind. There in that silent space is the solution, the design, the phrase, or the strategic directive you requested. It is pure gold. Capture it mentally, or write it down immediately in a physical record before daytime logic evaporates it. Phase 2. Cold starting the machinery, minute 5 to 15. Your body has been in a state of restorative paralysis. You must start the engine with a thermal and chemical shock. Immediate massive hydration to flush out toxins processed during the night. Joint movement to restore the lymphatic system's flow. The body calibrates to respond to the planet's gravitational demands. Phase 3. The assumption of the throne, minute 15 onwards. You do not pray asking for the day to be good. You decree the day's configuration. You review the downloads obtained during tactical rest and immediately translate them into three-dimensional attack plans. You take the geometric solution your subconscious delivered and turn it into work orders, lines of code or financial decisions. You have mastered the final frontier of elite productivity. You have stopped passing out from the weight of survival and started recharging your shields in the matrix of silence. You understand that rest is not a biological weakness, but a tactical weapon of massive asymmetry. While the entire labyrinth remains trapped in the illusion that they must destroy their bodies to prove their worth, you retreat strategically into the darkness, order your mind to weave threads of gold, and return at dawn with answers others will take years to discover. The recharge cycle is complete, the hardware is optimized, the software is updated, and the source codes have been extracted from the void. The sun of material reality rises, and the machinery is perfectly cold, calibrated, and ready for ballistic execution. You are the architect. You have your blueprints. It is time to materialize power. Chapter 8. The Architecture of Tomorrow, the Script of the Immediate Future. The labyrinth has propagated a logistical lie that has doomed millions of individuals with potential to failure. The myth that the day begins when the sun rises. They have sold you the romantic idea that dawn is the time to discover what you are going to do. They want you to sit with a cup of coffee, contemplate the horizon, and plan your moves as the world wakes up. This is the philosophy of losers and improvisers. It is the perfect recipe for tactical disaster. When the sun rises, the physical world enters a state of boiling and immediate entropy. The market opens, competitors attack, external demands skyrocket, and the urgencies of third parties begin to bombard your borders. If you open your eyes in the morning and use that moment of maximum voltage and chaos to ask yourself, "What should I do today?" you have already lost the war. You have yielded the asymmetric advantage. The architect of purpose understands an unshakable law of military and business physics. The battle is not planned in the middle of the crossfire. It is planned in the silence of the barracks the night before. The sovereign's day does not begin at 6 in the morning. The day begins at 10 at night the day before. The elite does not wake up to react. It wakes up to execute a three-dimensional script that was already written, audited, sealed, and approved in the most absolute isolation. The morning is not a blank canvas for inspiration. The morning is the theater of operations where calculated violence is deployed. To understand the urgency of designing the script of the immediate future, you must first dissect the morning pathology of 99% of humanity. Observe how the system has conditioned the slave's biology. The common man is torn from the existential coma by the shrill sound of an alarm. His body is immediately flooded with cortisol. He opens his eyes and, unable to tolerate the emptiness of his own existence, his first biological movement is to reach out to grab his mobile device. In that precise millisecond, before his feet have touched the ground, the slave has just committed the greatest act of treason against his own sovereignty. He has handed over the configuration of his mind to other people's agendas. By opening his email, social networks, or messaging apps, the individual allows the crises, complaints, urgencies, and noise of the outside world to dictate his emotional state. He automatically enters a reactive state. He spends the first hour of his day putting out other people's fires, responding to cheap stimuli, and consuming toxic dopamine. By the time he finally sits down to try to work on his own goals, his cognitive bandwidth is destroyed. His energy has been vampirized. Reactivity is the default state of those who do not have an empire to build. He who does not have a plan for his own life will inevitably be absorbed into someone else's plan. The architect repudiates reactivity with every cell of his body. The sovereign protects the first hour of his day with the lethality of a guard dog. And the only way to guarantee that the morning is an armored advance and not a chaotic retreat is to have a map of coordinates so precise there is no room for doubt, improvisation, or digital distraction. Decision fatigue, the biological limit. The design of the script of the immediate future is based on a real biological limitation of the human brain: decision fatigue. Your brain, although the most advanced quantum machine in the universe, operates with a finite battery of metabolic energy, ATP, for conscious decision-making. Every choice you make during the day, what clothes to wear, what to eat for breakfast, who to answer first, where to start a project, consumes a percentage of that battery. The mediocre individual wastes his cognitive energy reserve on trivial decisions during the first 2 hours of his morning. He stands in front of the closet, debating what to wear. He opens the refrigerator without knowing what to eat. He sits at the desk and debates with himself whether he should record a video, write a text, or check metrics. By the time he finally decides what to do, his willpower is at 20%, and at the first sign of difficulty, he procrastinates. The sovereign executes zero-friction engineering. The goal of the script from the night before is to eliminate absolutely all micro-decisions of the following morning. The architect decides nothing at dawn. He simply obeys the general he left in charge the night before, himself. Before entering tactical rest, the sovereign structures his physical and digital environment. The physical avatar. The clothes you will wear, the equipment you will need, everything is prepared like a soldier's armor before combat. There are no aesthetic decisions to make at dawn. Aesthetics were defined cold. Biological logistics. The next day's nutrition is pre-established. Fuel is not left to chance or cravings dictated by morning stress. The execution environment. The workspace is cleaned and configured. If the first task is recording, cameras, lights, and microphones are left on and in position. If the first task is writing, the software is left open with the document on screen. When the architect wakes up, the runway is clear. There is no resistance, there is no friction. You simply glide into execution with the inertia of a runaway locomotive. The 3 pieces of dominion. The script of the immediate future is not a to-do list. To-do lists are tools for low-level office workers who confuse being busy with being productive. A list of 30 trivial tasks only generates anxiety and encourages superficial work. The sovereign operates under the law of asymmetric impact. He understands that in any empire, 90% of the results come from 10% of the actions. In the stillness of the night, the architect isolates the noise and extracts only 3 pieces of dominion. 3 absolute, non-negotiable, and high-density objectives that will move the needle of the empire. It is not check emails. It is structure and record the sales campaign that will generate the next massive liquidity injection. It is not do internet research. It is design the script for the next disruptive product that will annihilate the competition in the niche. These 3 pieces are written with command language. They are not suggestions, they are decrees. And they are ordered under a relentless hierarchy. The most brutal, intimidating task with the highest economic or strategic impact is executed first. This is called devouring the monster. The slave leaves the hardest task for the end of the day, and as a result, never does it. His mind spends hours suffering from the anticipation of pain. The architect, who has designed his script in silence, wakes up and attacks the monster before the monster opens its eyes. By 10 in the morning, the sovereign has already executed more high-voltage work than the rest of his industry in a whole week. The rest of the day becomes a triumphal stroll over the rubble of the competition. Quantum synchronization. There is a hidden technology in the physical act of writing your script of the immediate future before sleeping. This connects us directly with neuroplasticity and tactical rest. When you write your 3 pieces of dominion on paper, the act of transferring thought to physical matter through ink has a massive neurological weight, and visualize them right before entering the regeneration chamber, a quantum synchronization occurs. You are handing your subconscious mind the exact GPS coordinates of where it must take you tomorrow. While your physical body sleeps and repairs itself, your quantum brain does not rest. It takes those 3 directives and begins to comb through the millions of data stored in your neural network. It audits potential problems, connects seemingly unrelated ideas, and designs the path of least resistance for execution. That is why the individual who plans in the morning suffers from writer's block or friction when starting. His brain has not had time to chew the problem. But the architect who left the script written the night before wakes up and feels a biological urge to start working. He needs no motivation. His subconscious already solved the logistical knots during the night and is desperate to download the solution into the physical world. Nighttime planning turns darkness into your business partner. The time you are supposedly inactive becomes a high-precision strategy laboratory. The ritual of closing the vault. Designing the script of the immediate future requires a state of absolute coldness. You cannot structure the architecture of tomorrow if you are still contaminated by today's emotions, failures, or stress. The labyrinth teaches you to take your problems to bed. The architect executes the ritual of closing the vault. This ritual is the bridge between today's chaos and tomorrow's lethality. It consists of 3 unshakable phases. The forensic audit, without emotion. You review the events of the day that just ended, what worked, what failed. If you made a tactical error, lost capital, or the strategy bore no fruit, you do not lament. You extract yourself from the body and observe the error like a surgeon observes a tumor. You extract the operational lesson, adjust the math, and bury the event. The error has already paid its rent in the form of experience. It does not have permission to occupy space in your mind tomorrow. Script writing. You draft the 3 pieces of dominion. You establish the logistics and eliminate friction. You leave clear guidelines for the morning you. The power cut. Matrix blackout. Once the script is sealed, the day is officially over. You turn off devices, disconnect your mind from the 3-dimensional network, and retreat to ataraxia. Any thought about the business or the empire that tries to sneak in after this point is violently rejected. The general has given the orders and retired to his quarters. The infantry cannot bother him until dawn. This hermetic seal protects your sanity and ensures that stress does not become a chronic disease. The sovereign knows how to compartmentalize his mind. When he works, he is a Category 5 hurricane force. When he rests, he is a lake of icy, still waters. The awakening of the monarch. Finally, the sun rises. The clock strikes the hour. The outside world, ignorant of the preparation that has occurred in the shadows, begins its routine of desperation. The masses turn on the television, check the news to see what they should be scared of today, complain about the weather, traffic, and the economy. And in the midst of that ocean of mediocrity, the architect opens his eyes. There is no hesitation. There are no questions about the meaning of life or doubts about purpose. The script of the immediate future is on the table, waiting for you. You get up with the weight of gravity in your favor. Your environment has already been purged of friction. Your clothes, your nutrition, and your tools are positioned with surgical precision. Your subconscious mind hands you the execution blueprints it processed during the night. You are a perfectly oiled ballistic machine, aiming at targets that were already calibrated in the silence. When you start executing your 3 pieces of dominion, you do not do it with the anxiety of someone waiting to see if they are lucky. You do it with the icy arrogance of someone who is simply documenting a victory that already occurred on the metaphysical plane. The market is not prepared for this level of premeditation. The competition reacts. You orchestrate. They doubt. You execute. They suffer decision fatigue at 9 in the morning. You are making industry-altering decisions at 10, operating from absolute certainty. The day does not belong to you because you claimed it at dawn. The day belongs to you because you kidnapped it, gagged it, and bent it to your will in the darkness of the night before. The script is written. The actors are in their positions. Raise the curtain and let the world watch how a monarch moves. Chapter 9. The Architecture of Winter, the Management of Abundance. The culminating moment has arrived. The dungeon doors have closed forever behind you, and the ring of authority has been placed on your hand. You have gone from being an ignored prisoner to becoming the absolute governor of the empire's resources. You have the system's favor, legal authority, and most importantly, the direct revelation of the creative source vibrating in your nervous system. You have the inside information. 7 years of monstrous abundance are coming, inexorably followed by 7 years of apocalyptic famine. 99% of supposed dreamers, and those operating under false spirituality, believe the work ends here. They believe that because the Creator gave them the vision, the empire will build itself by magic. This is the heresy of inaction and the lethal trap of magical thinking. The universe gives you the what, the vision, and the when, the macro cycle, but it demands, under penalty of annihilation, that you structure the how. Observe the ancient text with the coldness of a corporate strategist. The Creator gave Joseph the confidential warning, but the Creator did not come down from heaven with construction tools to build Egypt's granaries. The Creator did not make spreadsheets. The Creator did not design the logistics of transportation on the Nile River or structure the tax collection system. That was the exclusive work of the architect. Spiritual revelation or strategic intuition, devoid of financial execution and administrative rigor, are absolutely useless. In fact, they are radioactive because they give you the illusion of safety without the real infrastructure to back it up. The religion of the mediocre consists of praying and waiting passively for famine not to arrive. The faith of the elite consists of building reinforced concrete storage silos with the mathematical certainty that famine will inevitably knock down the door. This chapter is the turning point where the code reader transmutes into the governor of matter. If you possess the fire of purpose in your mind but are unable to read a balance sheet, if you do not know how to retain capital and ignore the phases of economic macro cycles, you will end up broke. And when that happens, you will blame bad luck, the economy, or invisible conspiracies for what was actually the direct result of your own mathematical incompetence. Intuition gave you the storm warning. Your coldness, discipline, and management capacity must build the ark. Immediately after the ascension to power, the 7 years of abundance began. History records that the land produced by the handful. The economy exploded in an unprecedented spiral of growth. There were liquidity surpluses in every corner of the empire. The pathology of summer, the fat cows. To master the architecture of winter, the sovereign must first understand the clinical pathology affecting the masses during the summer. In economic and operational terms, summer, or fat cows, represents that stage of the cycle where capital flow is fast and frictionless. It is the economy in hyper-expansion phase. It is the moment a business scales furiously, when bull markets make any investment seem like a stroke of genius, or when credit lines are cheap and abundant. What is the average individual's behavior when the system is flooded with abundance? He experiences a collapse of long-term judgment. Sudden abundance acts as a powerful narcotic. It turns off the human brain's prefrontal cortex and turns on the most primitive circuits of immediate gratification. When the average man receives a massive injection of capital or a substantial increase in income, he does not invest it to fortify his position. He instantly inflates his lifestyle. He buys the vehicle that depreciates the moment he turns it on, moves to a zip code that drains his liquidity, begins acquiring luxuries to impress people he despises, and, most dangerously, takes on debt based on the optical illusion that warm weather will be eternal. The mass assumes in its mathematical arrogance that if it generated 10 units of wealth today, it will generate 15 next month by inertia. They extrapolate the success of a temporary cycle into an infinite future. This is the pride that precedes the slaughterhouse. The architect of purpose, on the contrary, operates with icy strategic paranoia. When the sovereign saw that the land produced without measure, he did not organize endless banquets or victory parades. He did not relax under the illusion of abundance. He knew that the market's unbridled euphoria is the #1 biological and financial indicator that the collapse is programmed and on its way. While the rest of the empire celebrated, overate, and squandered their daily earnings, the architect plunged into an infernal logistical work regime. The text documents his operational behavior. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years of abundance, and laid up the food in the cities. And he gathered grain as the sand of the sea very much, until he stopped counting, for it was without number. The sovereign is the enemy of the party during the summer. When your business is at its peak, when clients arrive effortlessly and capital floods your accounts, that is not the time to take a vacation or raise your cost of living. That is the time to sound the internal alarms and work with double the ferocity. You must capitalize on the universe's inertia. You must become a systematic, ruthless, and silent hoarder of value. The elite does not use the years of abundance to finance a disproportionate lifestyle to impress the middle class. They use abundance to cement and shield the impregnable walls of their dynasty. The vision tax, the unshakable rule of asymmetric retention. To be able to store like the sand of the sea, the sovereign did not rely on the citizens' voluntary savings or the market's goodwill. The architect understands human psychology better than anyone. He knows the common human is biologically incapable of saving proactively when intoxicated by abundance. If you leave wealth retention to the individual's will in times of boom, the result will be zero. Therefore, the strategy proposed and executed with imperial authority was the institutionalization of mathematical retention. Take the fifth part of the land of Egypt in the 7 years of plenty. To take the fifth part means 20%. This is the golden law of asymmetric accumulation and the basis of the architecture of winter. The sovereign establishes a draconian vision tax on all his income streams, before paying business operations, before acquiring any liability, and definitely before financing any personal luxury. The architect automatically extracts a minimum of 20% of all capital entering his system and buries it in the winter vault. For the modern slave, hearing about strict 20% retention sounds like unacceptable deprivation. The slave will argue, the economy is very hard, costs are high, I cannot survive retaining that percentage. However, that same slave is capable of committing 30% of his future income to credit card debt to acquire perishable consumer goods. The problem is never the scarcity of resources. The problem is the inverted hierarchy of priorities and the lack of internal governance. You must become the ruthless dictator of your own economy. Retention must be an automated and non-negotiable process. If you make the mistake of waiting until the end of the monthly cycle to save whatever is left, Parkinson's law will crush you. Expenses will always expand, almost magically, to devour all available income. The mathematics of sovereignty is absolute. If your system generates 1,000 units, your expense structure must obligatorily operate with 800. The remaining 200 units do not exist for the present. They are soldiers sent to the future to finance your army. This capital is not a vacation fund or savings for minor emergencies. This capital is your war ammunition, designed with a single exclusive purpose: to survive the imminent annihilation of the market and have the liquidity needed to buy the mediocre's assets at liquidation prices when panic breaks out. One of the most catastrophic mistakes empire leaders and creators make is obsessing exclusively over attack metrics, massive income generation, while completely ignoring defense infrastructure, capital retention and protection. You can design the world's most powerful hydraulic pump, capable of extracting 1,000 liters of water per second, but if the tank where you store that water is full of cracks, you will die of thirst exactly like the man with no access to water. Generating wealth is a high-frequency skill. Retaining and protecting wealth is a science of structural engineering, the decentralization of storage. History not only says the architect collected the grain, it highlights a logistical detail that defines operational genius. He stored food in the cities, placing in each city the food from the surrounding fields. He did not pile wealth in a single vulnerable place. He structured the chain of custody. He created a decentralized mass storage system. He built the physical and organizational infrastructure so that, when the global supply chain collapsed under the weight of famine, each region had its own supply center, shielded against looting and logistical inefficiencies. This is the true architecture of winter, translated to creating your current empire. What are your modern granaries? You cannot store the energy of your abundance in obsolete or vulnerable vehicles that depreciate with inflation or are at the mercy of confiscatory regulations. Your modern granaries are your shielded investment vehicles, the legal structuring of your corporations, the protection of your assets, the diversification of your capital in different jurisdictions and currencies, and the automation of your systems so they can withstand external impacts. The sovereign spends the 7 years of fat cows obsessed with his empire's plumbing. He adjusts pressure valves, audits capital leaks, seals fiscal inefficiencies, and raises his safety margins. He understands with a clarity that terrifies novices that the global storm approaching on the horizon will have absolutely no mercy on structures built on fragile foundations. And then, with the precision of a cosmic clock, the sky darkens. The warm summer wind is replaced by the frost of the abyss. The water sources dry up, the earth cracks. Just as the source code predicted, and as history has cyclically demonstrated, summer ends abruptly and violently. And the 7 years of famine began to come, and there was famine in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. Analyze the macroeconomic magnitude of this event. The famine was not a local recession or a bump in a specific market. It was a systemic global crisis. The entire market, in all known jurisdictions, collapsed. This event represents the crash of financial markets, the severe contraction of credit, the hyperinflation of basic goods, and widespread panic. What happens in the neurology of 99% of the population when the lethal winter arrives? They enter a state of absolute biological panic. Yesterday, during the boom, everyone considered themselves a financial genius because the tide was artificially high and all boats floated effortlessly. Today, when liquidity has evaporated and the tide has dropped drastically, the market mercilessly reveals who was swimming naked. Those who inflated their lifestyle, those who mocked the architect's strategic paranoia, those who consumed 100% of what they generated are now on their knees. They contemplate their depreciated assets, their suffocating debts, and the collapse of their illusions of security. Panic destroys logic, and the masses begin to sell and liquidate everything they own at irrational prices in a desperate attempt to survive one more day. And what is the architect's posture during this apocalypse? The sovereign is sitting in the control center, observing the chaos through armored monitors, with a heart rate that experiences not the slightest alteration. He is not afraid. He does not panic. He does not pray to the system for salvation. Why should he be terrified of a storm he relentlessly prepared for, hour after hour for the last 7 years? Winter mercilessly destroys the improvised, but winter consecrates and crowns the architects. But in all the land of Egypt there was bread. This is not a literary phrase. It is the supreme reward for asymmetric discipline. While the outside world bleeds out and descends into chaos, your internal jurisdiction is in absolute peace. The ecosystem you have protected does not know crisis, because your paranoia and impeccable management during the summer have created a force field around it. Winter, which is a death sentence for the masses, becomes a simple operational transition for you. The mechanics of the transfer of wealth. We have reached the core of the global elite's financial operations. This is the event they don't teach you in traditional academic institutions. It is the mechanism that consolidates dynastic power, not for decades, but for centuries. The fundamental law of crises is this: wealth is never destroyed, it is simply transferred. It is transferred from the trembling hands of the impatient and improvised to the steel vaults of the prepared and disciplined. In winter, property titles change owners. Observe how the architect, devoid of sterile sentimentality, operated the ancient world's most massive economic crisis. He did not open the granaries to give away the food. The labyrinth, operating under a false morality of victimhood, might argue the noble action would have been to distribute wealth freely to avoid immediate pain. But the sovereign does not operate under the morality of pity. He operates under the mathematical laws of value consolidation. If you give away accumulated wealth without demanding a value exchange, you destroy the economy in the long term, prematurely deplete reserves, and create a society of dependent parasites. The architect opened the granaries, yes, but he demanded a calculated price for survival, executing the wealth transfer in 3 lethal phases. Phase 1, total liquidity extraction. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the food which they bought. In the first impact of the crisis, the market uses its cash savings to survive. The architect, as the only entity possessing the solution, the grain, vacuumed up all circulating liquidity from 2 entire nations. The state concentrated 100% of the available cash flow in its coffers. Competitors ran out of financial oxygen. Phase 2, transfer of mobile assets and means of production. When fiat currency ran out, the market came to the sovereign in a state of desperation. Give us bread, for our money is gone. Unfazed by panic, the architect executed the algorithm's next move. Give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock, since your money is gone. In a single logistical move, the sovereign exchanged the caloric energy of survival, grain, for the horses, flocks, donkeys, and mobile resources of the known world. He had just de facto monopolized humanity's agricultural means of production, supply chain, and transport capacity. Phase 3. Absolute real estate and territorial consolidation. The following year, stripped of liquidity and means of production, the masses returned. They had nothing material left to offer, except the only thing left, the ground beneath their feet and their own freedom. Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants to Pharaoh. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine was severe upon them, and the land became Pharaoh's. This is the masterpiece of asymmetric acquisition. The architect bought an entire nation at fractions of a penny on the dollar, driven by the collapse in prices, and he was able to do it solely and exclusively because he was the only actor on the board who had liquidity and reserves at the exact moment the market went into total collapse. This is the sovereign's ultimate algorithm. Macroeconomic crises are, in reality, periods of massive liquidation in the global market. When there is panic in the streets, when fear dictates selling decisions, real estate, stocks, companies, and high-quality human talent are devalued to minuscule fractions of their intrinsic value. The individual who had the mental fortitude to retain his vision tax, the 20%, during the 7 years of abundance, now finds himself with the firepower necessary to acquire fallen empires at ridiculous prices. You do not become the owner of the market during the boom years. During the boom, you simply collect and store gunpowder. You become immensely wealthy and consolidate your dynasty when you detonate that gunpowder in the abyss of winter. Winter is not a tragedy. It is the exclusive hunting ground of monarchs. Upon finishing the execution of winter, the architect has permanently altered the world's source code and socio-political structure. He has gone from being a code interpreter in a dungeon to becoming the planet's only source of survival. And the famine was over all the face of the earth. Then Joseph opened all the storehouses, and all countries came into Egypt to buy, because the famine was severe in all the earth. You have built the ultimate monopoly. This is the pinnacle of the architecture of purpose. You are not designed to compete eternally in a saturated market, scratching out a small percentage of market share. Your ultimate goal is to structure an ecosystem where the entire market is in the mathematical and biological need to ask you for permission to operate. You want to hold the keys to the granary when everyone else is dying of thirst. When you reach this level of value centralization, the nature of your power transforms. Power is no longer something you must exercise through physical effort, active persuasion, or brute force. Power becomes gravitational. High-level individuals, competitors who previously ignored you, and kings from other territories are forced to line up outside your doors, offering their resources, begging for a transaction with you. Your authority becomes undeniable, not because it is backed by a superficial title, but because it is cemented in the absolute ownership of the solution to a global problem. The sovereign who masters the management of abundance and the architecture of winter understands that capital and resources are simply stored energy, and whoever controls survival energy inevitably controls the minds, wills, and futures of nations and markets. You have consolidated your throne. You have empirically demonstrated that alignment with the source code has turned you into a force of nature. The execution has been perfect. Abundance was managed, winter was dominated, and the wealth transfer is complete. But the chessboard still has one final move pending. The creator is about to present the final test for the architect's ego, a test that will not be solved with gold or granaries, but with the highest spiritual technology in history. Prepare to face the ghosts of the past in the singularity of forgiveness. Chapter 10. The Landing, Waking Up as a Predator in a World of Prey. You have traveled the complete path of the architecture of power. You have descended into the pit of your own mind, fractured the tyranny of the linear clock, and embraced voluntary exile. You have mastered neuroplasticity in the vault of the early morning, and gone down to the basement to chain your demons through shadow engineering. You have purified yourself in the monopoly of isolation, aligned your quantum thermostat with asymmetric capital, and learn to regenerate your machinery through tactical rest, while leaving the next day's script perfectly structured. But the technology of sovereignty has a material purpose. Perpetual isolation without public execution is not mastery, it is cowardice. The monk who stays in the cave forever does not alter the world, he simply hides from it. The Dreamer's Code demands that the kinetic and strategic energy you have accumulated in the void be released upon the three-dimensional plane. We call this tactical event the head-on collision between your hidden preparation and the reality of the market, the landing. The landing is the exact moment you cross the invisible line separating the shadow from the public light. It is the instant you press the publish button, open the doors of your company, present your offer to the world, or emit your first frequency of authority before an audience. For the novice, the launch is a moment of paralyzing terror. The slave trembles when he comes into the light because he knows deep in his neurology that his preparation was mediocre. He fears judgment because his identity is still made of glass. For the architect, the landing is an administrative procedure. There is no fear, no friction, no doubts. You are not trying your luck to see if the market accepts you. You are waking up as an apex predator, stepping onto a territory full of docile prey. You are invading a jurisdiction that already belongs to you by right of intellectual and spiritual conquest. The battle was already won in silence. The public light is simply the stage where you come to collect the trophies. To execute a flawless landing, you must first perform a satellite reconnaissance of the terrain you are about to invade. You must understand the biology and psychology of your competition and your audience. You must understand the anatomy of the prey. What does 99% of humanity do at dawn? The outside world wakes up in a state of lethargy and resistance. They drag themselves out of bed cursing the alarm. They turn on their screens to inject a dose of collective hysteria, looking for what to be offended by or complain about that day. The entire labyrinth yawns. Mediocre creators, fake entrepreneurs, and your direct competition wake up looking for motivation. They need to watch an inspirational video or read an empty phrase to convince themselves that they must work. They complain about the algorithm, blame the economy, cry because the market is too saturated, and operate from a posture of perpetual victimhood. They are fragile. They are reactive. They are sedated by cheap comfort and paralyzed by the fear of what others will say. This is the herd. This is the three-dimensional ecosystem you are about to enter. The architect feels no hatred or emotional contempt for the prey. The architect observes it with the same analytical indifference with which a biologist observes a bacteria culture. You understand that their weakness, slowness, and reactivity are not obstacles for you. They are your greatest asymmetric advantage. If the world were full of relentless sovereigns, the conquest would be a bloody war of attrition. But the labyrinth has done the dirty work for you. It has softened your competition. They have atrophied their minds with cheap entertainment and broken their discipline. When you burst into the market at dawn, you are not competing against tireless geniuses. You are competing against infantilized adults who cannot keep their attention on a single goal for more than 15 seconds without checking their phones. By understanding the profound weakness of your environment, imposter syndrome disintegrates. You realize you don't need to be a mythical god to dominate your industry. You just need to be the only lethal predator, awake and focused in a jungle where everyone else is fast asleep. The most common tactical error during the landing is emotional overexcitement. The amateur launching a project is flooded with euphoria. He feels his heart racing, publishes his work, and sits biting his nails, waiting for the world to applaud him. That emotional roller coaster is a waste of thermodynamic energy and makes you vulnerable to the first criticism or the first silence of the market. The sovereign executes the landing from icy calibration. Motivation is an emotion, and like all emotions, it is a slave to hormonal and chemical fluctuation. The architect does not operate by motivation, he operates by geometry and discipline. When you open the doors of your empire to the public, your heart rate does not rise, your breathing is steady. You execute the script of the immediate future, which you left sealed the night before, with the mathematical coldness of a surgeon performing an incision. You enter the market without friction. You do not apologize for bursting into their space. You do not start your messages or proposals with prefixes of weakness like, "I know there are many people doing this, but," or "I hope you like my humble work." That is the syntax of beggars. The source code of your communication must exude dictatorial authority. You speak, write, and publish with the absolute certainty that you are delivering the resolution to a problem the market is too stupid or too lazy to solve on its own. You present yourself as the turning point. This attitude is not empty arrogance. It is the external manifestation of the shadow engineering you have already completed. It is impossible to fake this icy calibration. If you are pretending to be a sovereign, the first storm will break your disguise. But if you have truly forged your identity in isolation, the coldness is natural. You are made of ice because you have already been through the fire. The instant your code comes into contact with the masses, the labyrinth will activate its immune defense mechanisms. The system hates excellence because excellence highlights the mediocrity of the rest. When you land, you will be attacked. It is a mathematical certainty. You will receive criticism, incomprehension, anonymous hate, and direct rejection. Your tactics will be questioned by armchair scholars who have never built anything. Your aesthetics will be ridiculed by those who operate in ugliness and chaos. And what is even more lethal than the attack? Many times you will face the deafening silence of a market that takes time to process the frequency you are emitting. How does the human ego survive this assault? It doesn't. That is why the fragile ego had to be murdered in Chapter 4. The sovereign who lands no longer has a traditional ego to protect. He is covered by an armor of absolute ataraxia. Ataraxia is the state of total imperturbability of the spirit. It means becoming, in the strictest sense of the word, unoffendable. Being unoffendable is the most devastating superpower a human being can acquire in the 21st century. Today's society is structured around offense. Everyone seeks to be a victim. Everyone cries if their identity is questioned. Everyone demands safe spaces. The predator is unoffendable because he understands that an offense is nothing more than a sound wave traveling through the air or illuminated pixels on a screen. A criticism has no physical weight, no mass. It does not alter the flow of your breathing, nor does it steal capital from your bank accounts unless you grant it permission to do so. If a competitor tries to humiliate you, the slave reacts, defends himself, and enters a mud war, wasting his time and energy. The architect audits the attack as if it were a data point in a software. He asks himself, is there useful logistical information in this insult that allows me to optimize my machinery? If the answer is yes, he extracts the data, adjusts his system coldly, and discards the emotional wrapper of the insult. If the answer is no, he ignores the attack with an indifference so monumental that it becomes psychologically destructive to the attacker. The lion does not turn around to bark at the dog barking at him from behind a fence. The sovereign does not explain his vision to a blind man. When the market discovers it cannot offend you, make you react, alter your peace, or manipulate you through shame, the market panics and then submits. Immunity to offense makes you invulnerable, and invulnerability generates a gravitational magnetism that drags capital into your vault. While the market is reacting to the news of the day, fighting over current trends and drowning in short-term myopia, you land with a weapon of mass destruction they cannot even conceive: time compression. You arrive at the market with a decade of mental advantage. How is this physically possible at your age? Because you do not experience time linearly like the herd. During tactical rest and the subconscious processing order, your brain has been running simulations in the background. You have projected your empire 10, 20, and 50 years into the future. You have visualized the economic macro cycles, the 7 fat cows and the 7 lean cows. You have designed the infrastructure of your legacy, assuming that crises will occur, digital platforms will change, and local economies will fluctuate. The novice goes out to sell today to be able to eat tomorrow. If he doesn't sell today, his world ends. The architect goes to market today as part of a choreographed move in a chess game projected until the year 2040. This expanded perspective destroys anxiety. When you have a decade of mental advantage, small daily setbacks, a video that doesn't work, a fallen sale, a logistical delay, do not register as tragedies on your radar. They register as irrelevant statistical anomalies on an inevitable curve of mathematical growth. Operating from the future grants you an aura of a prophet. When you speak with clients, investors, or your audience, you do not sound like someone trying to convince them of something. You sound like someone who is already returning from the future and is simply informing them of how things are going to be. You speak with the certainty of one who has already read the end of the book. That temporal asymmetry is what makes your competition feel slow, heavy, and obsolete next to you. You are the future landing violently in their present. The landing is not a gradual, timid, or progressive process. You do not enter the water by getting your feet wet to see if it is cold. The sovereign does not ask permission to sit at his industry's table. The sovereign enters, flips the table, and establishes a new one. The architect's market penetration strategy is based on kinetic impact. In physics, kinetic energy is the energy of motion. It depends on two factors, mass and speed. For your landing to be unforgettable and lethal, you must maximize both. Mass. It is the volume and quality of your preparation. It is the asymmetric value you have accumulated in the shadow. Your content, your product, your aesthetics, and your knowledge cannot be the minimum viable. They must be a hyper-dense work of art, an undeniable monolith of excellence. Speed. It is the aggressiveness and lack of hesitation with which you launch your empire. There are no delays, no paralyzing perfectionism. Perfectionism is just another mask of fear. When the script of the immediate future dictates execution, you attack at lightning speed. When you cross the border and appear on the market's radar, you must fall like a lead anvil on glass. Your presence must be impossible to ignore. You do not seek to fit into your niche's ecosystem, you seek to disrupt it. If others post once a week complaining about being tired, you flood the net with daily authority. If others offer partial and confusing solutions, you deliver packaged systems that solve the pain at its root. Your landing must generate a shock to the system, an earthquake that forces competitors to stop and wonder where the hell you came from. This demonstration of brute force from the first second establishes your positioning. The labyrinth is cowardly by nature and respects force. When you hit the market with kinetic impact, the system immediately classifies you not as a beginner, but as an extinction-level threat for mediocre players and as a high-voltage partner for the elite. You have claimed the apex of the pyramid without apologizing. The sky is clear. The vault of the early morning has closed. You have crossed the bridge and are physically standing in the center of the global market. All the philosophy, metaphysics, dark psychology, and operative mathematics you have assimilated along this journey cease to be theory in this precise second. The simulation is over. From today on, your life is not governed by the laws of chance, nor by newscasts, nor by the opinions of those who have never built anything. You have signed the sovereign's contract. You know the rules of the game that govern material and immaterial reality. You know that the envy of the weak is simply the compass confirming your true north. You know linear time is a prison, and the early morning belongs to you. You know noise is an infection, and the acoustic fast is your shield. You know your demons are not monsters to fear, but hypercaloric fuel for your turbines. You know wealth is a magnetic frequency, and anxiety is its only poison. You know how to turn off the conscious interface so the subconscious can solve your company's most complex logarithms. Ignorance has evaporated. You can no longer pretend you don't know how power operates. If from this moment on you return to operating from victimhood, if you complain about the economy again, if you let yourself be consumed by doubt, or if you allow fear to dictate your actions, it will be an act of voluntary treason against the infinite intelligence that gave you this code. The world out there is on the verge of structural collapse. The masses are scared, disoriented, and orphaned of genuine leadership. They are dying of spiritual, aesthetic, and financial hunger. It is not your duty to save them all out of pity. It is your duty to become an entity so strong, so brilliant, and so impregnable that the mere sight of your empire proves to them there is a way out of the labyrinth. You are the icy beacon in the middle of the storm, the matriarch of a new era of builders who do not ask permission. Close your eyes for a second. Inhale the oxygen of the present. Adjust your armor. Look up with the sacred arrogance of those who have the backing of the universe. The night is over. The sun illuminates your face, but your thermostat is at absolute zero. The market breathes, ignorant of the predator that has just awakened among them. There is no more theory. There are no more words. Open your eyes. The throne is yours. Let the conquest begin. You have reached the end of the transmission. If you have assimilated the frequency of the previous 10 chapters, the architecture of your mind has been irreversibly and permanently altered. The source code of sovereignty has overwritten the operating system of scarcity, victimhood, and reactivity that the labyrinth had installed in you since the day of your birth. This manual was not designed to inspire you. Inspiration is a cheap emotional spark that fades after 24 hours. This manual was designed to dismantle your old identity and forge a new one through physics, strategy, and applied metaphysics. The simulation is over. You have crossed the point of no return. Ignorance was a comfortable shield. When you didn't know how the game of power worked, you could afford the luxury of blaming the government, the economy, the algorithm, or your circumstances for your lack of results. You could sit at the slaves' table and complain about the system, feeling justified in your mediocrity. Today, that shield has been disintegrated. You know the rules. You know that wealth is a matter of asymmetric gravity, not hard work. You know that fear is simply kinetic energy waiting to be burned in the engine room of your execution. You know that your attention is the most expensive currency in the universe, and that isolation is the sanctuary where empires are forged. From this instant, if you decide to operate from weakness again, if you return to seeking the validation of the herd, or if you allow an external crisis to dictate your financial thermostat, you will not be a victim. You will be a willing accomplice in your own annihilation. Failure will no longer be an accident. It will be a tactical choice you made out of cowardice. 'Tis the contract of blood and code, the law of execution. Before you close this file and go out to face the friction of the three-dimensional world, you must seal the final contract with infinite intelligence. This is the architect's oath, the 5 unshakable laws that will govern your dynasty until your last breath. 1. The law of the veto on mediocrity. You will never again negotiate the price of your vision to make others feel comfortable. If your standard of excellence, your impeccable aesthetics, and your ambition offend the small-minded, you will welcome the attack. You understand that the poison of the masses is simply the mathematical confirmation that you carry the authority of the 1%. You do not apologize for your greatness. 2. The law of silent execution. Your strategy is military-grade classified information. You no longer seek premature validation. You stop announcing your moves. You build in the shadows of the night vault. You incubate in the strictest secrecy, and you let the devastating violence of your results deafen the market. 3. The law of absolute ownership. Your authority does not depend on the approval of any platform, any client, or any corporate title. You operate with the psychology of an absolute owner, regardless of your current position. You make yourself indispensable through a work of asymmetric value so lethal that the market becomes dependent on your existence. 4. The law of the transmutation of chaos. If the system attacks, if a betrayal occurs, or if the market collapses, you do not panic. You know that chaos is the liquidation ground where you acquire empires for pennies on the dollar. The creator uses the fire of the economic winter as the logistical transport that annihilates your competition and hands you the monopoly. 5. The law of dynastic legacy. You are not accumulating capital or forging this empire for your mere temporary vanity. You are the steel link that breaks the chain of poverty for your entire lineage. Starting with you, ignorance and financial submission in your blood end forever. You are the architect, designing the titanium walls behind which the next generations will walk free. 30. Solitude at the top, the cold of the throne. You must accept one final operational reality. The path ahead of you is lonely, and it is okay that it is. The labyrinth offers you the warmth of the herd in exchange for your freedom. It offers you gold chains and constant applause in exchange for you never demanding the throne. Sovereignty, on the contrary, offers you the absolute cold of the top, the crushing weight of total responsibility, but it hands you the keys to reality. You will notice a radical change in your ecosystem starting tomorrow. You will see people running in circles, scared by ghosts, reacting to empty news, begging for attention, and wasting their vital energy. You will feel alien to them. You will observe them with the icy calm of someone who has transcended the matrix. They will call you arrogant, they will call you distant, they will say you have changed, and they will be absolutely right. Steel does not apologize to mud for being denser. The predator does not ask the prey for permission to feed. The monarch does not explain his moves to the pawn. That solitude is not a void. It is the space of maximum density where the quantum gravity of your empire operates without interference. Enjoy the silence. Enjoy the incomprehension of others, because it is the empirical proof that you have escaped the algorithm of mediocrity. IV, the final instruction. There is no more theory to discuss, there are no more chapters to read. Over-preparation, when it crosses a certain limit, becomes the most sophisticated form of procrastination. The market is out there, bleeding, disoriented, scared, and desperately waiting for someone to impose order. Corporations, algorithms, and the masses are looking for a leader who does not tremble. The knowledge is already encrypted in your nervous system. Neuroplasticity has done its job. Your thermostat is calibrated at absolute zero. The weapon is loaded, the safety is off, and the target is illuminated. Close the book, cut the theory, turn off the noise. Rise, architect, the simulation is over. Step out of the shadows and claim the world.